On the outskirts, near the kingdom's capital, there was a boy named Wazoo. He was helping a fellow villager with her chores. As he chopped wood for her, the woman began to sympathize with him. She knew he was often compared to his sister, Kagani. The woman told Wazoo that she still thought he was a good kid. But then she also mentioned Kagani's incredible genius. She didn't stop there. She talked about Wazoo's childhood friend, Arya, saying that she was a holy woman. Although the woman's comments were innocent, they felt like they were piercing Wazoo's ears. He felt flustered and uneasy, despite her kind words. Nonetheless, Wazoo appreciated the woman's gratitude as he watched her leave after he finished the task for her. Afterward, his little sister, Kagani, arrived with a big smile. She happily informed him about the return of his beloved childhood friend, Arya. Wazoo's eyes lit up upon hearing the news. Without wasting any time, they immediately rushed to the capital. There, villagers had gathered to welcome the hero and the holy woman. As Wazoo's eyes widened, he caught sight of Arya marching in the middle of the crowd alongside humanity's savior. Seeing her safe and sound, Wazoo felt a wave of relief wash over him. His childhood friend was back, and she was safe. In front of a large audience, the king announced that their country was now safe thanks to the hero and his party, who had successfully defeated the demon lord. Kagani was fascinated by Arya's beauty and exclaimed this to Wazoo. However, Wazoo responded that, to him, Arya hadn't changed at all. Kagani felt that Arya seemed to be much more respected now and appeared to be above their status. Arya's new position as a revered holy woman made Kagani think she had become someone almost unreachable. Meanwhile, the king urged the hero to state the reward he desired, which led to Wazoo reminiscing as he watched the ceremony. He thought about his long friendship with Arya. They had known each other since they were born and had been childhood friends for as long as he could remember. When they were 12, they made a promise to stay together in the future. It almost felt like a marriage vow, and they acted like a married couple. They got along really well. However, when the news of Wazoo and Arya being engaged got out, Kagani was pretty angered when she first heard it. At the time, Wazoo believed they were destined to be together and never thought things would change so quickly. Unfortunately, their situation took a turn for the worse a year after their engagement. Knights arrived to spread the news of the Demon King's appearance, forcibly recruiting Arya as the holy woman for the hero's party. Without a second thought, Wazoo volunteered to go with Arya, only to be met with disgusted reactions from the priests. The hero mocked Wazoo, asking what an ordinary guy like him could do to help subjugate the demon lord. Wazoo came back to reality after thinking about those bad memories. Thankfully, Kagani was there to cheer him up. She expressed her genuine wish to return to their usual days with Arya when they were still younger. This gave Wazoo confidence that it would surely happen now that the holy woman had returned home. But Wazoo's dreams soon shattered when they suddenly heard the hero's request from the king. The hero stated his wish by grabbing Arya's shoulder, pulling her closer to him, and declaring that he wanted to make the holy woman his wife. Watching the hero with his beloved childhood friend erased all the hope and joy inside Wazoo. Unable to bear any more heartache, he slipped through the large crowd and ran away from the scene. Kagani tried to stop him, but he did not care. On this day, which was also his 15th birthday, Wazoo ran towards his home while people nearby looked at him in confusion. When Wazoo finally arrived at his house, he saw the cute drawing he had made with Arya one last time, his tears dropping onto the paper. Ready to depart, Wazoo wrote a note wishing for the happiness of the girl he loved with all his heart. He told everyone not to look for him and included a congratulatory message for Arya and the hero. With a determined look on his face, Wazoo poured all his bitterness, frustration, and sadness into a new goal. He ventured into the woods, heading toward the monster-filled mountains, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Unfortunately, Wazoo did not expect to walk into danger so soon. He found himself passing through large bushes, trying to run away from something. As he turned around, he caught sight of his pursuers right behind him, ready to turn him into their food. A humanoid cat and a humanoid fish with huge muscles were teaming up to make Wazoo their lunch. This strange team of monsters continued chasing their prey relentlessly. The humanoid fish threw a small stick towards Wazoo, aiming to slow him down. Fear gripped Wazoo as he ran, his heart pounding in his chest. Fortunately, Wazoo dodged the stick by a hair's breadth and managed to maintain a safe distance between himself and the monsters chasing him. But his luck seemed about to run out when he tripped on an enormous tree root and stumbled to the ground. Before Wazoo could recover and figure out what had just happened, he saw the monsters had already caught up to him. They were watching him with hungry eyes, ready to pounce. The monsters were drooling with hunger, while Wazoo was almost drenched in sweat. He desperately tried to convince them that he tasted terrible, but it seemed his words were falling on deaf ears. The monsters continued growling at him, showing no signs of understanding. Realizing there was little chance to talk his way out of this, Wazoo wondered if playing dead might be his only option. However, before he could decide, the monster cat suddenly roared at him. Startled into action, Wazoo sprinted for his life, hoping to outrun the hungry monsters behind him. As Wazoo kept running, he soon spotted a long wooden bridge ahead that would lead him closer to the dangerous mountains. Feeling that taking the risk was better than becoming monster food, he decided to go for it and dash towards the bridge. However, Wazoo's decision to cross the bridge only seemed to excite the monsters even more. As soon as Wazoo started crossing, he heard a loud crack. Looking back, he saw the two monsters aggressively destroying the bridge in an attempt to make him fall. They were so determined and hungry that they began to break the bridge while still standing on it themselves. Fortunately, Wazoo managed to make it to the other side of the bridge without falling, although the monsters were still hot on his heels. To his surprise, a loud bang echoed through the woods as the cat monster delivered an extraordinary slash that hit a tree near Wazoo, causing it to topple over. Despite the cat monster missing its target, the fish monster jumped in celebration. Wazoo found himself backed into a corner with no way to escape the grasp of the monsters who were intent on devouring him. All Wazoo could do was clench his fists in frustration and cower in fear when he suddenly noticed something strange. The fish and cat monsters, who had been relentlessly pursuing him, strangely looked up and mysteriously halted their advance towards their intended meal. Trembling, they pointed at Wazoo's back as if they were terrified of something behind him. Nervously, Wazoo turned around to see what had scared off the monsters. To his astonishment, he beheld a pair of enormous wings belonging to a fearsome dragon. It stood before him, accompanied by another creature with a skull for a face and demonic horns. The two monstrous figures proved too intimidating even for the cat and fish monsters, who shrieked in horror after catching sight of them. Unfortunately for those monsters, the demon noticed their presence. In a panic, the cat and fish monsters shrieked and hurriedly fled, abandoning their mission to make Wazoo their next meal. Wazoo stood there in shock and confusion, unable to utter a word in response to the terrifying entities before him. The dragon and the demonic skeleton quickly assessed Wazoo's appearance and concluded he was not a rare elf but just a human lost in the forest. Despite Wazoo's speechlessness and fear, the demonic skeleton reassured him that there was no need to be afraid, as they had no interest in him whatsoever. Wazoo gathered the courage to ask them what they meant by sparing him. The dragon responded with a yawn, dismissing Wazoo as too small to be worth eating. Neil agreed, suggesting they depart. With that, Neil climbed onto the dragon's back, and they soared into the sky, leaving Wazoo behind, bewildered but alive. As Wazoo processed the surreal events, it slowly dawned on him that he had just encountered a real dragon. Little did he realize at that moment that this encounter would set the stage for a future confrontation with the formidable creature. Despite the unexpected turn of events, Wazoo reluctantly returned to the destroyed bridge, realizing he couldn't cross it anymore. With the monsters still on his trail and showing no signs of giving up, he felt frustration building inside him at their relentless pursuit. However, amidst the dire situation, Wazoo noticed ants harvesting fruit from a nearby tree. Spotting the source, he climbed up and secured some of the fruit for himself. After trying it, he found the skin unpleasant but the insides surprisingly tasty. Remembering he always carried his Adventurer Guild card, Wazoo used it to peel the fruit in desperation, lacking any better tools at hand. Staring at his guild card, Wazoo couldn't help but reflect on why he had joined as an F-ranked adventurer. His sole motivation had been to impress and support his childhood friend, Arya, and to prove himself against everyone's beloved hero. Despite his earnest efforts, Wazoo felt disheartened by his lack of significant improvement in stats. He had worked tirelessly, pouring his all into training, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he lacked inherent talent. In his own assessment, he considered himself slightly above average at best, paling in comparison to the brilliance of his sister Kagani. Despite the weight on his chest whenever he thought of Arya and Kagani, Wazoo couldn't shake his desire to reconnect with them. However, trapped in the forest and unable to fight off the monsters from earlier, he felt a deep sense of dejection. Yet, amidst his despair, Wazoo found a glimmer of hope in the notorious mountains, where even S-ranked monsters like the dragon showed no interest in him. Wazoo pressed on with his solitary journey, enduring scorching sun, dense fog, raging storms, and relentless shifts in extreme weather. Miraculously, he survived each ordeal. Though his weary expression hinted at his disbelief, it almost felt like he was trapped in some kind of anime training montage, though he knew reality was far harsher. Seeking temporary refuge from the dangers of both forest and mountain, Wazoo found shelter in a cave. Hunger gnawed at him, driving him out periodically to gather fruits for sustenance. During one precarious attempt, he nearly fell from a tree but managed to secure the fruit. Each day was a struggle for survival, and as Wazoo reflected on his situation, he realized 3 days had already passed since he left town. After his failed attempt at climbing the tree, Wazoo took a moment to assess himself and was shocked to find his body noticeably thinner, having lost a concerning amount of weight. Despite his strong willpower, he couldn't simply conjure food by imagining mouth-watering meals. It only made his hunger more acute. As he daydreamed about food, Wazoo was suddenly jolted back to reality by the loud growl of his empty stomach. Thankfully, after several days of wandering through the forest, Wazoo stumbled upon a stroke of luck, a beast that had met its end. He hesitated for a moment, then approached the carcass. Realizing this was his only option for survival, he resolved to do what was necessary. In a desperate bid for survival, Wazoo sat beside the beast and began eating without hesitation, consuming every last bit despite the horrible taste and smell. To counteract the foul taste lingering in his mouth, he hastily grabbed a nearby plant, hoping it would help, but instead, it paralyzed his mouth, leaving him incapacitated and unable to feel his tongue. Crawling on the ground, oblivious to his surroundings, Wazoo unknowingly edged closer to a cliff and tumbled over, his face meeting the hard ground. Lying there, Wazoo glanced up at the sky and spotted a peculiar round object resembling a massive eyeball in the twilight. Mistaking it for the sun appearing oddly in the evening sky, he dismissed it and remained still until the eyeball suddenly darted around in apparent panic, fixating on him before hurtling towards him. Bracing for impact, Wazoo closed his eyes, only to find that nothing happened. The eyeball vanished without a trace. As Wazoo drifted into slumber, dismissing the strange encounter with the eyeball as mere imagination, a dream emerged in his mind. It depicted a cherished memory of Arya placing a flower crown on his head, to which he responded with a compliment, suggesting it suited her even better. In the dream, this innocent exchange led to Arya proposing marriage once they both turned 15, filling Wazoo's heart with joy. However, the sweetness of the memory quickly turned bitter as the dream shifted to the heart-wrenching scene of the hero publicly declaring his intention to marry Arya. Wazoo watched in despair as the hero kissed Arya, shattering his hopes and leaving him devastated. Waking abruptly from his haunting nightmare, Wazoo realized it was already morning. Despite the harsh conditions surrounding him, the vivid dream strangely left him feeling physically stronger. However, this newfound resilience did little to change his grim reality. Determined to survive, Wazoo embarked on a grueling routine of trial and error, eating anything he could find and enduring the subsequent sickness to test whether plants were edible. As weeks turned into months, this harsh lifestyle became Wazoo's new normal. He began to question if he could ever reintegrate into human society after so long in isolation. With no one to converse with since leaving the village, Wazoo's face showed signs of wear, his hygiene deteriorating in the unforgiving wilderness. Taking out his guild card, Wazoo applied his bodily fluid to activate its unique function, capable of displaying the status of any registered individual, regardless of rank. Hopeful yet apprehensive, he awaited the results, only to be met with words instead of numbers. They bluntly labeled him as weak and essentially useless, casting a shadow over his aspirations for improvement. Perplexed and disheartened, Wazoo questioned whether his guild card was malfunctioning. Turning the card over, he discovered a revelation on the back, an enumeration of his unique skills. First among them was taste in bad food, an unexpected but perhaps fitting trait given his recent dietary trials. Next was resistance against abnormal conditions, hinting at his resilience in enduring the harsh environment he found himself in. The final skill intrigued him the most, Goddess's Sympathy. Wazoo stares at his card, utterly confused. He can't calm down after discovering the shocking skills listed on it. This confusion makes Wazoo scream out loud. After a bit, he manages to calm himself and starts reading the details of his abilities. The sword skill is exactly what he expected, but the other two skills are unique. He got them from eating lots of weird things. The strangest skill is Goddess's Sympathy. It feels like the goddess herself is telling Wazoo that she'll support him with her powers. Wazoo can't stop wondering what's wrong with his guild card. He thinks he must be dreaming because that seems like the only reasonable explanation. Suddenly, he remembers seeing a glowing eyeball in the sky last night. He concludes that it might have been the goddess, and now she's somehow inside his guild card. Wazoo convinces himself that the goddess is inside his guild card. All his pondering makes him overlook something important on the card, the percentage that shows he is still 100% human. Luckily, it's still at 100%. Even so, Wazoo is sure he's weak. But then, the goddess reassures him with comforting words, telling him that he will be happy because he has her protection. Shocked that the text on the card has changed, Wazoo slams the card on the ground. He's terrified that the goddess can read his mind. Despite his fear, Wazoo knows that having the goddess's protection is a good thing. He goes back to the cave, worried that his stats might be in negative numbers if the descriptions are so harsh. However, the skill having taste in bad food turns out to be a hidden blessing, can actually increase his stats. Wazoo thinks that with more skill, he could handle the beasts in the forest. Wazoo eats all the unthinkable foods he can find. He repeats the process of eating and throwing up endlessly, but he survives the abnormal status effects like poisoning thanks to the goddess's protection. Of course, Wazoo doesn't neglect his training. Day after day, he works on his body. About half a year goes by, and he undeniably looks better and stronger. Despite these changes, the description on his guild card is still in words, making it hard to understand. However, it clearly shows Wazoo's improvement. On top of that, his skill evolves into Glutton, and his resistance has increased tremendously. Yet, the goddess's support turns into the goddess's encouragement, which somehow makes Wazoo feel uneasy. Putting his worries aside for now, Wazoo exits the cave for his most awaited big day, his first monster hunt. It's still hard for him to fight due to a lack of weapons, so he has set a trap and is patiently waiting for a monster to pass by. After a few seconds of hiding, his prey shows up. Wazoo is eager to finally enjoy some meat again, but it seems like his luck stats are 0 because what appears in front of him is a large slime. Wazoo thinks his efforts are now worthless and it's clearly not what he expected. Instead of a juicy forest animal, he's looking at something more like jelly than meat. His complaints don't last long, though, and Wazoo accepts that he's having jelly for dinner. However, he soon realizes he's underestimated the situation. When the slime gets stuck in his trap, it starts to melt away all the bamboo. Upon closer inspection, he sees that it's not just the bamboo melting but also a rock lizard that was just chilling nearby. Usually, adventurers use fire arrows or long spears, basically long-range weapons, to destroy a slime's core. Wazoo realizes his mistake when the pitfall trap suddenly emits smoke, and the slime starts shooting acid balls at him. Taken by surprise, Wazoo desperately looks for something to use as a weapon. He eventually grabs a pebble. Wasting no time, he counterattacks by throwing the rock at the monster in the pitfall. To his amazement, the slime splatters immediately with one hit. Wazoo is left puzzled, questioning if this situation is real. Unfortunately, he still doubts that he has gotten so strong. Instead of celebrating, he collects the scattered slime to secure his dinner and spends the next few days learning how to deal with the monsters in the forest. Inside the cave, Wazoo creates a bunch of wall paintings depicting the creatures in the woods. He even discovers various types of monsters. In addition, Wazoo maps the entire forest after successfully circling around it over the past few days. Now, what's left is to explore the notorious mountain filled with S-class beasts. Unlike his pitiful past self, the current Wazoo is confident he can become stronger by going there. More importantly, he can finally eat a proper meal and live like a normal human being. However, he is still concerned about what his sister's reaction will be when she sees him in this state. Wazoo is pretty sure she will scold him for his tattered clothes, but he knows she'll still offer to fix them like a caring sibling. Wazoo feels a bit sad because he misses his little sister greatly, but he knows he has to continue on his path. He crafts a new outfit using materials he gains from defeating monsters. At least now, with his new outfit, he won't be embarrassed to wear it in front of other people. Thanks to that, Wazoo resolves to head to the mountain the next morning. The fateful day arrives in the blink of an eye, and Wazoo's evolution is apparent. It's been a year since he took down that slime, and a year and a half since he departed from his town. Wazoo is clearly more invincible now. A monster's fang can no longer scratch him. He looks at his guild card and sees that almost all of his stats are now incredibly high, almost absurdly so. However, his mana points and magic are still 0. What's concerning is the fact that Wazoo is only 88% human now, and it's unclear where the other 12% of his humanity went. Despite feeling a bit unsettled, he remains confident. His glutton skill has evolved into Super Glutton, making it easier for him to fight monsters due to its effects. With this newfound strength, Wazoo is ready to face whatever challenges the mountain holds. However, Wazoo's newfound strength, which the goddess says is close to surpassing hers, brings a different kind of challenge. He worries it might make it harder for him to return to his hometown. Climbing to the top of the mountain, Wazoo defeats the monsters he encounters. He wants to see just how strong he really is, and it turns out that the beasts aren't challenging for him anymore. Eventually, Wazoo reaches an area above the clouds and stares at the beautiful sunrise. It's a breathtaking moment in his adventures. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind interrupts him. In that split second, Wazoo sees something shocking even for him. A huge dragon crushing a monster in its mouth with extreme power. The dragon lands near Wazoo, who stares in shock at the magnificent creature. It's a bit of a late reaction, but Wazoo finally shouts that a dragon has appeared. The dragon spits out the monster it had in its mouth and asks Wazoo what a human is doing here. Surprised but keeping his cool, Wazoo casually answers that he just walked here alone. The dragon isn't buying Wazoo's explanation, but while it's getting angry, the earlier monster uses this chance to escape from the dragon's grasp. It leaps away, shouting insults at the dragon and calling him a dumb lizard. Even Wazoo is surprised by the turn of events. He watches as the monster prepares for a counterattack, only to be silenced by the dragon's enormous claws. In the end, Wazoo has no time to worry about his stained clothes because the dragon is asking him what he's doing here in his backyard, unaware that a small fox-like creature is watching them. Intimidatingly, the dragon orders Wazoo to play somewhere else, but instead of backing down, Wazoo becomes irritated. He complains to the dragon about dirtying his clothes, ignoring the fact that the dragon thinks he's being foolish. The dragon asks once again what Wazoo is doing here, only to learn that he's simply wandering. Surprisingly, this piques the interest of the mighty being. Wazoo then declares his desire to find someone stronger than him, which leads the dragon to challenge him, introducing himself as the Dragon King. There's no fear in Wazoo's eyes as he provokes the dragon by asking if his title is just self-proclaimed. The dragon, however, is not enraged. Rather, he's excited and counters with another threat. In the towering mountains teeming with powerful S-ranked beasts, Wazoo confronted the fearsome Dragon King with unwavering confidence and excitement. He stared at his opponent without a trace of fear. Little did Wazoo realize, his overconfidence would soon undo all his hard work, leaving him to regret challenging the Dragon King. Without hesitation, Wazoo charged at the dragon, ready to begin the battle. In the bustling center market of Iskoa Kingdom's capital, Wazoo's younger sister Kagani chatted with a vendor about her recent travels to a nearby town and her upcoming plans to visit the next village. Unbeknownst to Kagani, the vendor was aware of her quest to find her brother and offered words of encouragement, assuring her that she would soon reunite with Wazoo. Kagani couldn't help but smile, confident in her belief that she would find her brother soon because, in her opinion, he was quite helpless without her. The vendor chuckled, agreeing with Kagani's assessment, and even gave her a generous 50% discount, much to the envy of other customers nearby. Despite her outward cheerfulness, the vendor's inquiry stirred a concern within Kagani. He asked if she had uncovered any clues about Wazoo's whereabouts, prompting Kagani to share her discoveries. She mentioned her suspicion that Wazoo might be in a distant city because it seemed unlikely he would venture into the mountains. As they conversed, the vendor jokingly suggested that Wazoo might have found himself a beautiful girlfriend somewhere, but Kagani dismissed the idea, concealing her true feelings. Behind her casual facade, she believed firmly that Wazoo couldn't possibly manage such a feat. Suddenly, the cup Kagani was holding shattered, alarming not only the vendor but also the other customers nearby. Amidst the commotion, a peddler introduced himself to Kagani, offering his assistance in locating Wazoo after overhearing their discussion. Despite feeling grateful for everyone's support, Kagani couldn't shake her concern about her older brother's whereabouts, completely unaware that Wazoo was in the midst of a fierce battle against the Dragon King. Meanwhile, Wazoo defended against the dragon's claw strike and braced himself as the Dragon King prepared to unleash a devastating breath attack, choosing to confront it head-on to test his own strength. The charge didn't take long, and soon the dragon unleashed a torrent of scorching flames aimed directly at Wazoo, intending to incinerate him. Despite the intense heat and flames, Wazoo miraculously managed to stand up, shocking the Dragon King who expected him to be defeated. However, Wazoo's clothes were completely destroyed by the fire, leaving him standing there in his birthday suit, a surprising sight for both the dragon and anyone witnessing the battle. Seeing Wazoo more concerned about his burnt clothes than the earlier attack surprised the Dragon King, who couldn't understand how the human could remain so composed. In reality, Wazoo was anything but calm. He was frustrated over his ruined outfit. The Dragon King urged Wazoo to look around, revealing the ground turning red and melting from the intense heat. However, Wazoo's reaction wasn't what the dragon expected, further infuriating the Dragon King. Determined to end the battle decisively, the Dragon King prepared to deliver a final blow. However, Wazoo had had enough of the dragon's taunts. He swiftly struck the Dragon King with his fist and grabbed onto its claws to prevent being swatted away. Channeling his frustration, Wazoo delivered a powerful punch to the dragon's stomach, fueled by irritation at the Dragon King's incessant interruptions. The dragon crashed into a nearby wall, consciousness fading, leaving Wazoo visibly troubled by the outcome. He questioned whether he had gone too far, doubting if such feats were within the capabilities of a normal human. Sometime later, the dragon regained consciousness, shaking his head in confusion. To his surprise, he found Wazoo sitting casually beside him. Wazoo greeted him calmly, though the dragon was still in shock. Annoyed by the dragon's earlier actions, Wazoo teased him about burning his clothes, which the dragon tried to avoid discussing altogether. Instead, the dragon asked why he was still alive, considering Wazoo had emerged as the victor of their duel. He questioned Wazoo about his decision not to end his life after defeating him. Eventually, the dragon realized that Wazoo had no intention of ending his life. He simply wanted new clothes. This revelation caused the Dragon King, Ragnar, to burst into laughter at Wazoo's seemingly trivial reason for their fierce battle. Amused by Wazoo's sincerity, Ragnar invited him to his castle to acquire the outfit he desired so eagerly. Intrigued, Wazoo accepted the offer and climbed onto Ragnar's back as they flew towards the castle, nearing the cliff of the mountain. During the flight, Ragnar revealed his name to Wazoo, who introduced himself in return as an ordinary human. As they departed, Wazoo marveled at the breathtaking scenery below while casually mentioning that he had no money to pay for the clothes. To this, Ragnar simply smiled and assured Wazoo that the single powerful punch from their battle earlier was payment enough for the clothes he sought. Shortly after arriving at Ragnar's castle, the Dragon King landed gracefully and asked Wazoo for his opinion on the grandeur of the castle. Impressed, Wazoo acknowledged that Ragnar's palace was indeed more magnificent and larger than the castles in his own kingdom of Iskoa. The Dragon King, feeling smug, let out a proud snort as he boasted about his home. However, Wazoo's immediate concern was his need for clothes. Ragnar advised him to wait on the balcony while he fetched some, not wanting Wazoo to roam around unclothed. With no other choice, Wazoo passed the time gazing out from the balcony. Suddenly, something fell from the sky and hit his face. When he removed it, Wazoo discovered it was a small white dragon. Confused and curious, Wazoo and the little dragon stared at each other, both tilting their heads in curiosity. The small dragon then squeaked and circled around Wazoo's head before landing on him and bursting into tears. As Wazoo tried to make sense of the situation, he sensed the arrival of 4 unfamiliar individuals. These strangers immediately began scolding Wazoo, questioning why he was there without any clothes. Wazoo, never one to back down, taunted them in return, but quickly realized to his embarrassment that he was still unclothed. The two parties faced each other, ready to engage in a confrontation, despite the small white dragon relaxing on Wazoo's head. This seemed inconsequential to the high elf, Ruto, who launched a slashing attack at Wazoo, only to have his weapon completely destroyed by the human's unexpected strength. Meanwhile, the necromancer Neil reappeared, accompanied by his werewolf companion Zeal. They joined forces with the bulky beast man, Gain, who was already grappling with Wazoo. Zeal took advantage of the situation to disrupt Wazoo's movements, retreating swiftly as Neil struck their opponent with lightning magic. Much to their dismay, Wazoo emerged completely unscathed despite the power of their combined assault, prompting them to escalate their efforts. Ruto, showcasing the magic prowess of a high elf, unleashed a spell next, followed by Neil reciting a dark and ominous incantation. Zeal and Gain, relying on their formidable physical abilities, prepared to overwhelm Wazoo. Undeterred, Wazoo met their challenge head-on, motivated by their display of strength, and continued to taunt them defiantly. In the aftermath of the intense battle, all 4 attackers lay unconscious on the ground, defeated by Wazoo. However, instead of feeling victorious, Wazoo was troubled rather than satisfied with the outcome. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice, and he turned to see a large white dragon, clearly irritated, demanding an explanation for the commotion. Even Ragnar appeared nervous, revealing that the white dragon was none other than his wife, Meryl. Wazoo quickly pieced together the situation. When the attackers regained consciousness, Meryl introduced herself as the Dragon King's wife and the mother of the little white dragon, Mir. Meryl, the white dragon, glanced at Wazoo, who was finally clad in clothes after the chaotic events. She remarked that it was rare for her daughter, Mir, to take a liking to someone other than themselves. This comment caused the 4 attackers, who had been hostile moments ago, to smirk in amusement. In contrast, Ragnar, the Dragon King, interjected with a serious question, asking Wazoo if he had any inappropriate intentions toward his daughter. Meryl scolded her husband for being distrustful, while Mir squeaked in agreement, indicating that her mother was the only one who truly believed in Wazoo and trusted him. Fortunately, it became evident that the other 4, despite their earlier aggression, also supported Wazoo. Ragnar, referring to Wazoo as a dear friend, entrusted his daughter's safety to him as well. Moved by their trust and determined to protect Mir at all costs, Wazoo declared his resolve, willing to risk his life if necessary to fulfill that promise. The next day, Zeal observed Wazoo and the little dragon, Mir, playing and enjoying themselves through a window, accompanied by Neil. Neil couldn't resist commenting that Wazoo didn't appear strong or intimidating enough to have defeated all 4 of them. Wazoo noticed their gaze and friendly waved at them, prompting Neil and Zeal to reluctantly acknowledge that he wasn't as bad as they initially thought. For Zeal, who found nice people irritating, Wazoo's friendly demeanor grated on him. Nevertheless, Wazoo continued to play with Mir, laughing joyfully as they had fun together. Their merriment was interrupted when Ragnar suddenly appeared behind a nearby wall, silently observing Wazoo with a lingering sense of distrust, especially concerning his daughter. Wazoo nervously met Ragnar's gaze, unsure of how to reassure the Dragon King of his intentions. As time passed, everyone gathered for dinner and engaged in conversation about themselves. Wazoo found himself seeking advice about Mir, the little dragon who always stayed close to him. Neil, perhaps mischievously, offered some unconventional advice that Wazoo knew wasn't realistic. Despite the ups and downs, peaceful days seemed to fly by quickly. Wazoo eventually decided to accept Meryl's offer to take Mir into the outside world. He couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps he was being tested to prove himself worthy of being Mir's companion. After spending some time in the Dragon King's castle, Wazoo prepared to bid farewell to Ragnar and Meryl as he embarked on his next adventure alongside Mir. The Dragon Mother advised them to take care, but their departure took a tense turn when Ragnar issued a stern warning. He threatened that if anything were to happen to his daughter, Wazoo wouldn't live to see another day, emphasizing the importance of Wazoo's commitment to protect Mir at all costs. Meanwhile, Neil, the necromancer, reminded Wazoo of their previous discussion, urging him to pursue his dreams with sincerity and courage. Wazoo responded with a cheerful smile, acknowledging Neil's advice and agreeing to approach his journey earnestly and boldly. The adventurer Wazoo embarked on his journey with Mir, descending the mountain until they became disoriented, unsure of their whereabouts. Suddenly, the cat and fish monster reappeared, seemingly intent on settling their score with Wazoo once and for all. Wazoo swiftly delivered a powerful punch that sent the monsters flying into the sky, hoping to be rid of them for good. Mir celebrated their victory cheerfully, smiling brightly. With the immediate threat dealt with, they faced the dilemma of deciding their next destination. Suddenly, an idea struck Wazoo, prompting him to retrieve his guild card and appeal to the goddess for guidance. He earnestly pleaded with her to show them the way forward. Hearing his prayers, the goddess responded by drawing a cross and using a tiny twig to determine their next direction. The twig pointed east, indicating that heading in that direction would bring them fortune. Despite the goddess's mystical method, Wazoo couldn't hide his nervousness at the prospect of relying on such unconventional guidance. Following the goddess's guidance, Wazoo and Mir ventured deeper into the forest, where Wazoo suddenly realized that he had turned 17 years old. As they traveled, they encountered another human who initially seemed wary, hoping Wazoo wasn't a bandit or any troublemaker. Wazoo quickly assured him that he wasn't, expressing genuine happiness at meeting another person. They engaged in conversation about the unique route they were taking, unaware that Mir was growing jealous of the attention Wazoo was giving the stranger. Wazoo couldn't help but feel that their meeting was fated. The man introduced himself as Shiro, a peddler, and displayed his box of wares, offering them for sale. Wazoo regretfully admitted he had no money but promised to buy something the next time they crossed paths. The peddler, Shiro, was perfectly content with Wazoo's decision not to buy anything and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Wazoo, however, was so excited that he referred to Shiro as a friend of the same age, which gave Shiro pause for thought. After a moment's reflection, he accepted the designation happily, pleased with the newfound friendship. Feeling a bond, Wazoo invited Shiro to share a meal together next time they crossed paths. After this heartfelt exchange, they bid farewell and continued on their respective journeys. Wazoo's joyful mood abruptly shattered when a sudden arrow hurtled toward him. Enraged, Wazoo swiftly caught and destroyed the arrow, demanding to know who dared to attack his beloved little dragon. Driven by rage, Wazoo sprinted towards the source of the arrow, determined to confront and teach the culprit a lesson with his fists. However, upon arrival, he stumbled upon a distressing scene. A group of bandits had captured an elf girl named Sheena, threatening her companions with harm if they intervened. The three elves stood helplessly, frustrated and nervous, knowing that any attempt to rescue Sheena could lead to dire consequences for her. The bandit leader reveled in taunting and provoking the elves, confident in their inability to retaliate against his gang. Despite their fear and the risks involved, the elves grappled with the agonizing decision of whether to intervene to save their friend or obey the bandits' threats to prevent further harm. Suddenly, to the elves' surprise, a human came sprinting towards them and the bandits at full speed. Wazoo joined forces with the elves, his irritation palpable as he demanded to know if the bandits were responsible for the arrow. The elves and bandits alike were curious about this unexpected newcomer. The bandits, meanwhile, took an interest in Mir, suggesting the dragon could fetch a high price. The bandit leader arrogantly planned to handle Wazoo himself, confident in his ability to deal with the boy. However, before he could react, Wazoo's fist was poised dangerously close to his face, ready to strike. In a moment of clarity, Wazoo realized he needed to restrain himself. Another outburst could lead to unintended consequences. As Wazoo moved to restrain himself, it was already too late. The force behind his fist was unstoppable. The impact landed squarely on the bandit's face, sending him flying and causing significant damage. Wazoo immediately expressed regret, apologizing for the unintended consequence of his strength. However, his apology fell short as both parties stood in stunned silence, grappling with the display of Wazoo's extraordinary power. The bandit leader, recovering from the blow, pleaded with Wazoo to halt, reminding him that they were of the same race. Desperately, he tried to justify their actions by claiming that the elf they had captured was one of those who used their magic to harm humans. Understanding the bandits' attempt to justify their actions, Wazoo countered with a pointed reminder about who was being considered for sale at a high price. With resolve, Wazoo swiftly incapacitated all the bandits, aided by Mir, who unleashed fiery blasts from her small mouth, ensuring the elf named Sheena was safely rescued. Once Sheena was free, Wazoo instructed the elves to escort her to a secure location. Unbeknownst to him, this momentary distraction was exactly what the bandit leader had been waiting for. Just as the bandit attempted a sneak attack on Wazoo, one of the elves intervened in the nick of time. Activating a magical blade, the elves swiftly dispatched their assailant, protecting Wazoo from harm and securing their victory over the bandits. Captivated by the graceful presence of the long-eared elf, Wazoo found himself intrigued not only by her beauty, but also by her evident magical abilities. As the elf expressed her gratitude for saving her companion, Sheena, Wazoo felt a swell of satisfaction. Sheena herself joined in, expressing her thanks along with the other two elves, all smiling warmly at him. Wazoo responded with humility, pleased to have been able to help. Finally, he learned the name of the elf he had rescued. With heartfelt gratitude, the elves extended an invitation for Wazoo to visit their village, where they hoped to properly thank him for his heroic actions. Arriving at the elf village, Wazoo was awestruck by its beauty. Houses nestled among towering trees greeted his eyes, and he couldn't help but marvel at the sight. He couldn't fathom how they climbed up to their homes and asked about the stairs. As they exchanged names, Wazoo learned that the elf who had saved him was named Salona. His wonder only grew when he witnessed the elves effortlessly soaring towards their houses. Realizing he couldn't fly, Wazoo expressed his concern, but Salona assured him it wasn't an issue. The male elf offered to carry Wazoo in his arms, ensuring they could all reach their destination comfortably. Soon after, Sheena and her family welcome Wazoo and Mir to their home, where Wazoo reveals the whole reason for his adventuring journey. The other elves laugh at the idea of Wazoo trying to find women to join his adventuring group, though perhaps it seems too ridiculous for their race. One of the elves, however, believes Wazoo's strength could make it possible. Salona is also impressed by Wazoo's movements, which even her eyes cannot follow, prompting Sheena and the others to ask how Wazoo became so strong in the first place. Without hesitation, Wazoo reveals that he trained in the mountain, but the elves' reactions are skeptical, as expected. As the others escort Sheena to her room for bedtime, she sleepily says that she wants to be Wazoo's bride. Amidst everything going on, Wazoo noticed someone's presence but decided not to dwell on it too long. He headed to the river to cleanse himself, feeling delighted. He came up with an idea to give Mir a bath tomorrow, reflecting on today's events of making new friends and talking to lots of people. Eventually, he submerged in the water, wishing he could use Salona's magic. Lost in thought, Wazoo failed to notice the cloaked elf lurking in the trees. He went with the flow of the water for a while and emerged with a refreshed look on his face. Suddenly, he noticed someone bathing in front of him. It was Salona, in the middle of taking a bath. Wazoo took his time processing the information in his head, while the embarrassed Salona panicked and recited a spell, aiming it straight at Wazoo before running away. Fortunately, her attack missed, and Wazoo lived to see another day. He realized that he had messed everything up, while the cloaked elf continued to observe from the shadows. The elf was disappointed, thinking that he couldn't rely on Salona to get the job done. The next day rolled in, and Wazoo wasted no time in apologizing profusely to Salona for accidentally seeing her bathing without clothes the previous night. The other two elves were also present, witnessing Salona's embarrassment and Wazoo's sincere regret. Salona blushed and forgave Wazoo right away, even saying sorry for blasting magic at him out of the blue. She pointed out that Wazoo was the one who barged into the bath unexpectedly. Watching this scene unfold, the other elf couldn't help but find it amusing. It was the first time she had seen Salona act this way. Despite Salona's forgiveness, she sternly told Wazoo to forget everything he saw. However, Wazoo seemed hesitant to obey, his expression revealing his reluctance. Sensing his hesitation, Salona warned him that she would report the incident to the village chief and let him decide on the punishment. Reluctantly, Wazoo accepted Salona's conditions, and the other elves teased him good-naturedly about the incident. However, the teasing ended when Salona revealed that the village chief was actually grateful to Wazoo for his earlier actions. She also invited Wazoo and Mir to stay in their village if they didn't have any urgent business elsewhere. Wazoo expressed his appreciation for the offer. Salona expressed her gratitude to Mir as well and offered to tell them more about the village. However, she needed to leave for now to discuss matters with the village chief first. After a few days, Wazoo observed the elves luring a beast in the forest. Yuyuna, the male elf, gave Luluna an opportunity to attack, allowing her to shoot an arrow straight at the monster and injure it severely. Luluna then gave Wazoo a chance to deliver the finishing blow to the enemy, and he eagerly stepped in to help. Wazoo tried his best to hold back his immense power as he brought the beast down with a single powerful smash, but the force was still enough to make the foe tremble in pain. Yuyuna praised Wazoo for defeating their enemy and for effectively cooperating with them, going so far as to call Wazoo a fellow guardian. It turned out that this was the elves' method to protect their village. Combatants like the twins, Yuyuna and Luluna, belonged to a group known as the Guardians, who took care of the beasts in the vicinity and turned them into food. As they began walking back to the village, Luluna mentioned that even Salona would be surprised by the number of enemies they had defeated. Yuyuna, however, doubted it, explaining that Salona was their leader and had saved them countless times in the past. Nevertheless, Yuyuna acknowledged that today's success belonged to Wazoo. In the midst of their conversation, the trio suddenly heard someone yelling Salona's name in a worried tone. They hurried to investigate and discovered that an enormous scorpion had appeared on the hunting ground, and Salona, the leader of the Guardians, was the only one handling the situation. Luluna turned to Wazoo and said that the hooded elf in front of them is Gazuna. As they stayed hidden behind some bushes, listening to the other elves, Luluna and Yuyuna grew increasingly worried. Gazuna tried to assure them that everything would be okay, but their fears persisted. They were concerned because Salona was revealed to be in the midst of a battle, protecting the wounded to allow them to escape safely. In response to the situation, Gazuna mentioned that he would send a few reinforcements. Wazoo, feeling anxious, shared the same concern. The twins informed Wazoo that the cloaked elf, Gazuna, was actually a bad guy, and they couldn't trust his words completely. This information prompted the three of them to hurry toward the direction from which they had overheard the conversation. Near the village, an enormous scorpion faced Salona, the leader of the Guardians. The scorpion seemed to have the upper hand in the battle because Salona was prioritizing the safety of a wounded person, not allowing the monster to get closer to their village. Desperately defending herself from the scorpion's attacks with a small dagger, Salona deflected its strikes whenever she found an opportunity for the wounded person to escape. Finally, Wazoo arrived with the twins, rushing to Salona's aid. He yelled at her to get her attention, asking if she was okay, unaware that his question distracted the female elf. Seizing the opportunity, the scorpion struck Salona with its tail, sending her flying. Wazoo called out to Salona again, this time in a much worse situation as she slowly fell unconscious due to the grave injury inflicted by the monster. Enraged and frustrated, Wazoo screamed out his anger and punched the scorpion's tail, unable to accept what had happened to Salona. Immediately after, He leaped towards her as she fell from the sky, catching her to prevent her from suffering a severe fall or further injury. Thankfully, Salona woke up, although she panicked upon realizing that Wazoo was carrying her in his arms. She learned that the scorpion had been taken down, but flustered, she asked Wazoo to put her down. Wazoo refused, insisting on carrying the wounded girl to the village. However, Salona insisted on walking by herself, feeling ashamed that she was covered in dirt. Unbeknownst to them, the monster was still lurking in the shadows as they continued their progress, developing feelings for each other. Salona, however, got up to check on the wounded person from earlier. Unfortunately, it was too late for them to notice that the gigantic scorpion was still alive and ready to devour Wazoo. Despite the hopelessness of the situation, everyone horrifyingly warned Wazoo of the approaching threat. But the monster was already one step ahead, and it took a bite out of almost half of Wazoo's body before they could react. The elves wasted no time in attempting to take down the gigantic scorpion, immediately dispersing to distract it and save Wazoo. This time, it was Salona who yelled the human's name, ordering the monster to let him go. Suddenly, the scorpion's mouth cracked open, and Wazoo's face reappeared, wearing a casual smile as if nothing serious had happened. Surprised and confused, the elves let out a collective noise of disbelief. They found it hard to believe the gruesome event they had just witnessed. However, their enemy was still alive and ready to retaliate against the puny human. Irritated, Wazoo glared at the persistent monster before swiftly sending it to the netherworld with a single finger flick on its forehead. At this point, the elves could only conclude that the human was incredibly strong, and they needed to come to terms with this reality. With everything settled, Wazoo urged his companions to head back. They returned to the elven village where everyone welcomed them happily. The elves were visibly relieved that all of them were safe. Amid the joyous atmosphere, Wazoo noticed one elf who stood out with a frustrated expression, Gazuna. Wazoo realized that Gazuna was the same elf the others were talking to earlier when they were worried about Salona. Unfortunately, a woman blocked Wazoo's view, distracting him with food for himself and Mir. By the time Wazoo turned his attention back, Gazuna had disappeared into the darkness. Deciding to focus on the food for now, Wazoo pushed the thought of Gazuna to the back of his mind. As the night deepened, Wazoo found Salona alone and offered to walk her home. Concerned about Salona's wounds, Wazoo insisted on accompanying her, and Salona thankfully allowed him to go with her. Along the way, Wazoo couldn't help but recall the last time they were alone together, during the bath incident. He wondered if Salona was grossed out by his presence because of that incident. Before Wazoo could dwell on his thoughts, Salona suddenly urged him to stop where they were. She thanked Wazoo sincerely for saving her life. However, Wazoo didn't feel worthy of her gratitude, blaming himself for failing to prevent a single wound on her. In response, Salona assured Wazoo that he truly was a kind person, not to mention incredibly strong. She admitted that her strength, which was considered the best in the entire village, paled in comparison to Wazoo's. This unexpected praise caught Wazoo off guard, leaving him flustered. However, his heart swelled with joy at Salona's words. As Salona got up, she expressed her relief that Wazoo was stronger than her. Despite a hint of disappointment on Wazoo's face, as he assumed this might lead to a love confession, it turned out to be something else entirely. Salona wanted to convey that Wazoo could stay permanently in their village. Meanwhile, in the hunting ground, Gazuna approached the defeated scorpion with disgust, irritated that the monster had been defeated. With a wave of his hand, he absorbed its essence, growing even more annoyed by the unexpected appearance of the human adventurer, Wazoo. Gazuna then produced two small, ominous-looking balls. With a dark grin, Gazuna threw the balls into the air, declaring his intention to handle the situation personally. In an instant, ferocious beasts appeared from the balls, summoned to do his bidding. 1 week had passed since then, and Wazoo woke up from his slumber with a renewed motivation to help protect the village. He was determined to make a difference. As he gathered his thoughts, Laluna suddenly burst through the window in a panic, urgently telling Wazoo to come down immediately. Startled, Wazoo followed Laluna's urgency and rushed down to where the elves were gathered. There, he saw Salona standing in the middle, facing off against a cloaked elf. It was evident that she was engaged in a high-stakes duel, and the village chief was acting as a witness to the confrontation. With determination in his eyes, Wazoo leaped down from his room, landing safely thanks to Mir, the little dragon who assisted him. Wazoo quickly approached the twins to find out more about the situation. He learned that Kazuna had challenged Salona to a duel, and the stakes were incredibly high. The winner would become the head guardian, while the loser would be forced to leave the village. It became clear to Wazoo that Kazuna's jealousy of Salona was the root cause of his frustration. Despite the seriousness of the consequences, both participants had no objections to the punishment. The village chief intervened and declared an inviolable territory, casting an elven barrier to signal the start of the match. This act marked the beginning of the duel, setting the stage for a tense and decisive confrontation between Salona and Kazuna. Without wasting a second, Kazuna charged towards Salona, attempting a strike. However, Salona remained composed and blocked his attack effortlessly, following up with a swift kick that sent Kazuna flying a considerable distance. Wazoo, the twins, and the other elves present acted as Salona's cheerleaders, lending their support and strength, which seemed to be overwhelmingly in her favor. Despite the support Salona received, Kazuna showed no signs of being overwhelmed. Instead, he picked up a piece of rock and began to speak, his words dripping with hatred and envy. He blamed Salona for all the misfortunes in his life, accusing the Guardian leader of being responsible for various events that confused both Salona and the spectators of the duel. No one understood what Kazuna was talking about, and the ominous nature of his words added to the confusion. Before anyone could make sense of Kazuna's accusations, he proceeded with his vengeance plan. He threw the rock at Salona, using it as a distraction to activate the cursed balls he had been holding. In a chilling display, Kazuna unleashed the dark power lying dormant inside him, revealing his allegiance to the forces of darkness. The air around Kazuna crackled with malevolent energy as the cursed balls activated, signaling a drastic shift in the duel. The onlookers, including Wazoo and the elves, watched in horror as Kazuna's true intentions became clear. All of a sudden, Salona's surroundings were enveloped in darkness, a spell that clearly was not elven magic, sending shivers down the spines of the elves. The ground shook as monstrous creatures began to stampede, causing the villagers to panic. The village chief demanded to know from Kazuna what he had done to bring such fear upon them. Wazoo sensed something but was unsure, until he heard a scream, and Kazuna finally revealed that monsters driven by his grudge were already on their way to the village. As Kazuna admitted to his treachery, a group of gigantic and ferocious beasts arrived on the scene, striking fear into everyone with their unbeatable sizes. Kazuna laughed maniacally, ordering his minions to rampage freely, knowing that their sheer numbers were too much for even the Guardian's leader to handle. Salona could only express her frustration, knowing it was futile to complain in the face of such overwhelming odds. The screams of the villagers created a perfect distraction for Salona, leaving her vulnerable to Kazuna's attack. Kazuna seized the opportunity, striking at Salona in her moment of distraction. On the other hand, Laluna and Yuyuna urged Wazoo to head to higher ground for safety, and the townspeople followed suit to protect themselves from the monstrous threat. Unfortunately, not everyone managed to evacuate in time, a fact Kazuna anticipated as he presented Salona with a grim choice: take his life or watch everyone else perish. Kazuna's motives became clear. He was exploiting Salona's reluctance to harm him, knowing she couldn't defeat him without causing harm. As the situation grew dire, Wazoo called out to Salona with a smile, asking if she was okay because he had already taken care of a significant number of monsters. Salona was dumbfounded by the unprecedented turn of events, as was Kazuna, who was enraged to learn that a mere human had dispatched a majority of his minions. Kazuna, disgusted, tried to speak to Wazoo, but Wazoo brutally reminded him that he wasn't talking to him. Kazuna's face twisted in disgust as he couldn't bear to hear Wazoo cheer for Salona and reassure her that he would handle all the monsters outside the barrier. Thanks to Wazoo, Salona was able to focus on the duel, but instead of fighting, she implored Kazuna to stop the atrocities. Kazuna, clenching his fist in frustration, grabbed another red sphere and declared his plan to end Salona once and for all. The rain fell heavily, darkening the clouds and matching the grim mood of the scene. Kazuna, transformed into his demonic form, unleashed a powerful punch at Salona, sending her crashing into the edge of the elven barrier. This sight worried everyone, especially the twins and Wazoo, as Kazuna's newfound strength far surpassed their abilities. Wazoo, seeing the danger and feeling enraged by Kazuna's actions, casually destroyed the supposedly indestructible elven barrier with a single punch and joined the battle against the evil elf. Demonic Kazuna, now infuriated, ordered Wazoo not to interfere and fired a powerful beam at him, but Wazoo easily blocked it. Refusing to back down, Wazoo rendered all of Kazuna's attacks useless, all the while reminding him of his despicable motive to eliminate Salona from the world. Kazuna, attempting to brush off Wazoo's involvement, insisted that the conflict had nothing to do with him, but these words only fueled Wazoo's anger further. In response, he delivered a powerful kick to Kazuna's face and declared his feelings for Salona, stating boldly that he liked her. At that moment, Kazuna's red sphere emerged from his mouth, and he turned to dust, his evil form disintegrating. Wazoo's heart was heavy as he turned away from Salona, unable to bear the pain of her rejection. His concern over what face to make was quickly replaced by heartache as Salona blushed in response to his confession. She gently expressed her happiness that he saw her in such a way, but immediately followed it with an apology, stating that she needed to remain in the village to protect it as its guardian. She couldn't bear the thought of Wazoo confining himself to their small village for her sake, which broke Wazoo's heart even more. To shield Salona from seeing his pain, Wazoo forced a smile, masking his own heartbreak. He then made the decision to leave the village immediately, citing Mir's need to see the outside world as an excuse. Without saying goodbye to anyone, Wazoo fled from the village, tears streaming down his face, running as far away as he could. After a long time away from the forest and Salona, Wazoo found himself at a peaceful little inn. That morning, he was gently woken up by Lula, the inn's enthusiastic maid. She couldn't contain her excitement, talking about how yesterday's events left her feeling so refreshed that she had the best sleep ever and even woke up early. The thought of those erranked bullies going down so easily still gave her chills. The town had never seen a hero like the one who showed up, and now everyone was buzzing with excitement. Lula was eagerly anticipating Mir's next big move. Wazoo, realizing she wasn't referring to him, pointed out that he had done his best too. Lula quickly assured him that she noticed, recalling how strong he looked with Mir, the fiery little dragon, perched on his shoulder. This wandering hero had vanquished evil yet again and then crashed at the Breeze of Light Inn. Lula then reminded him about his reason for visiting the guild that day. Wazoo confirmed that he hadn't forgotten. He needed to take on a quest so they could reissue his guild card. Lula added that the guild master was eager to meet Wazoo. She emphasized that he must do his best when they meet. Wazoo, slightly confused, asked if her father, Reagan, wasn't supposed to be the one giving him the quest. Lula just smiled and told him he'd find out when he arrived at the guild. She mentioned that she really wanted to accompany him but had to go pick up more bread for the inn's customers. Concerned, Wazoo asked if she'd be okay, especially considering the possibility of running into monsters again. Lula reassured him, saying not to worry. She had been doing this for years and promised to be even quicker at running away this time. In Lula's place, someone else would be escorting Wazoo. She introduced Emma, the receptionist from the Adventurers Guild. Lula then handed over the situation to Emma before heading off to her errands. Wazoo, curious, asked why the guild's receptionist had come in person. Emma explained that the guild master had summoned him directly. She then mentioned that his fight with Black Blaze yesterday had become quite the hot topic, and the guild master couldn't wait to meet him. As Emma closed in on Wazoo, she suggested that he change his clothes quickly, and before he could react, she started removing them herself. Panicking, Wazoo insisted that he could manage on his own. Emma, unfazed, assured him that there was no need to be shy. Despite her looks, she was quite skilled at this sort of thing. Emma escorts Wazoo to the Adventurers Guild in Linux City. Once inside, she instructs him to follow her to the guild master's office on the top floor. As they begin the climb to the third floor, she playfully warns him not to stare at her hips. Exhausted, Wazoo responds that he's too tired to even think about it. As they ascend, Wazoo notices the bustling guild filled with adventurers, including demi-humans he hadn't seen back at the inn. Suddenly, Wazoo notices Emma panting and asks if she's okay. Blushing, she admits that climbing this high is a challenge since she rarely does it. He notices her legs trembling but decides to look away, determined not to give in to temptation. When they finally reach the guild master's office, Wazoo steps inside and sees a man standing beside a study table. The man greets Wazoo warmly, thanking him for coming and introducing himself as Reagan, the guild master of Linux City. Wazoo is stunned upon hearing the name. Reagan, sensing his tension, invites him to sit down and relax. Reagan goes on to explain that he's heard everything that happened yesterday from Lula and Kayla. He expresses deep gratitude for saving them from the Black Blaze rampage. Wazoo, still in shock, asks if Reagan is really Lula's father. Reagan confirms that Lula is indeed his daughter and Kayla is his wife. Wazoo, incredulous, bursts out, questioning how someone like Reagan, a bald and old man, could be related to someone as sweet as Lula, suggesting she must be Kayla's daughter from a previous marriage. Reagan, visibly irritated, responds that Wazoo certainly doesn't hold back for someone he just met. He firmly states that Lula is truly his daughter and that he married Kayla out of love, warning Wazoo to watch his tone in the future. Feeling a mix of disbelief and self-pity, Wazoo comments that even a bald old goat like Reagan has a kind wife and a cute daughter, while he remains alone. It dawns on him why Lula mentioned her dad would help him. Reagan is both the guild master and the inn's owner. Gloomily, Wazoo tells Reagan that he'll forgive him since the food at his inn is delicious. Reagan, curious, asks why an F-ranked adventurer like Wazoo would speak so boldly. Wazoo explains that he's already faced death once, so he has nothing left to lose. Reagan, acknowledging the harsh life Wazoo must have lived, says it's time to move on to business. Wazoo, eager to get his guild card reissued, asks for the quest. But Reagan reveals that he didn't summon Wazoo just for that. After sending the Black Blaze members to the clinic, their quest has gone unclaimed, and Reagan wants Wazoo to take it on in their place. Wazoo asks why someone else can't handle it, but Reagan insists that the other adventurers are too weak. Wazoo points out that he's still an F rank, but Reagan counters by reminding him that he defeated an A rank party without a scratch. Besides, Reagan adds, this job is perfect for Wazoo, especially since he's tamed a dragon, even if it is just a child. Wazoo, confused, asks what Reagan means. Reagan explains that about 2 weeks ago, a merchant reported seeing a dragon-like silhouette on a nearby hill. Although there have been no casualties yet, there's no guarantee the dragon won't attack humans. So Reagan wants Wazoo to investigate, find out its location, numbers, type, and condition, and subjugate it if possible. Wazoo, realizing the challenge, sarcastically agrees to take on the impossible job. Reagan thanks him and mentions that the quest rewards 30 gold coins. Wazoo's eyes light up at the thought of still having some money left over after paying for his guild card. Reagan, amused, comments that he's never seen someone so excited to accept such a dangerous quest. Wazoo, confident, declares that he'll just punch the dragon away if necessary, seeing this as an excellent opportunity. Reagan, sensing Wazoo's determination, leaves the task in his hands but advises him to prepare carefully. Wazoo, ever the minimalist, says he only needs a map. Anything else would just be a burden. Reagan tells him to get one from Emma before he sets off. Wazoo casually calls Reagan Mr. Balding and announces he's heading out right away. Reagan, clearly irritated, shouts that he isn't bald, he just shaves his head, but Wazoo is already running out of the room. Despite his grumbling, Reagan can't help but worry about Wazoo. However, since Lula assured him that Wazoo is super strong, he decides to trust in his daughter's judgment and looks forward to Wazoo's report. After getting the map, Wazoo realizes he also needs to gather some rations in case food is scarce on his journey. As he walks through the streets, 2 kids spot Mir and, charmed by her, offer her some snacks, commenting on how cute the little dragon is. Wazoo can't help but think that Mir has definitely become popular after yesterday's events. With supplies in mind, he heads back to the inn. Kayla, surprised to learn that Wazoo just found out her husband is the guild master, apologizes and explains that she assumed Lula had already told him. She quickly packs some sandwiches and water for his journey. After leaving the inn, Wazoo accidentally bumps into a girl who seems to be in a hurry. She quickly apologizes, but before Wazoo can respond, they hear voices of men searching for her. Wazoo asks if she's being chased, and when she nods, he takes her hand and helps her hide. The men search nearby, wondering where she disappeared to. One of them, annoyed, suggests that she'll return to the mansion by sunset since she has nowhere else to go. They had hoped to have fun with her at noon, but now they'll have to wait for another time. Once the men are gone, Wazoo tells the girl that it's safe to come out now. She thanks him and asks if he's the one who defeated the A-rank adventurers yesterday. Wazoo, shyly, admits that it was him and introduces himself as Wazoo. The girl, smiling, says that's a lovely name. She pulls back her hood and introduces herself as Tada. She insists on repaying him, but Wazoo apologizes, explaining that he has to head out on a dragon-slaying quest right now. Tada, surprised, asks if he's really going with such light equipment, implying he must be very strong. Wazoo, smiling, admits she's not wrong and tells her he'll definitely return to the city later so she can share more about herself. Curious, Tada asks why he went out of his way to help her, a complete stranger. Wazoo explains that her lonely expression made it impossible for him to leave her alone. He promises to return as soon as possible and bids her farewell. On his way out of the city, Wazoo runs into Orlando, the guard who issued him his temporary pass. Orlando recognizes Wazoo and asks where he's heading. Wazoo mentions he's off on a quest, and Orlando, noticing his light gear, advises him to at least take a sword or spear. Wazoo insists he's fine as is. Before Wazoo leaves, Orlando reminds him that since he's leaving the city, he needs to return the temporary pass. He also warns Wazoo that, while Mir might be strong, fighting a dragon alone is tantamount to taunting death. Wazoo, however, ignores the warning and runs off. As he watches Wazoo go, Orlando shakes his head, hoping the strange adventurer makes it back alive. Wazoo eventually stops and looks toward the distant mountains. He checks the map and recalls Reagan's description. The dragon should be on a small hill next to a large lake, located just north of the eastern forest. Realizing they won't make it on foot, Wazoo tells Mir they'll need to run. Mir, however, points out that she wants lunch first. Wazoo sets her down, and to his surprise, Mir makes lunch disappear and reappear instantly. Overjoyed, Wazoo picks her up, marveling at her newfound storage magic. He's thrilled, realizing they won't have to carry anything on their journey. Hugging her tightly, Wazoo playfully declares that she's amazing, fluffy, and now has a storage ability too. He jokingly adds that maybe she'll be his future bride. With that, they start running toward the mountains. As they travel, Wazoo takes in the vast landscape, marveling at how big the world is and wondering where he might find a true friend. They finally reach the area, but there's no dragon in sight. Spotting a cave, Wazoo decides to investigate. Inside, he finds the space empty, no dragon there either. But suddenly, the queen dragon appears, roaring loudly. Recognizing Wazoo, she demands to know if her husband sent him. She declares that she won't return to her castle. At first, Wazoo doesn't pay attention to her words, just relieved to see Mir's mother. But it quickly dawns on him that she's angry, and the situation might be more complicated than he anticipated. Wazoo, noticing Mel's intense anger, asks her why she's so upset, especially in front of her daughter. He suggests she calm down and asks what she means by her husband sending him here. He explains that he hasn't seen Ragnir since their last meeting and wonders if they've had a fight. Mel, still furious, tells him it's far more serious than just a fight. She's decided to leave Ragnir for good and return to her birthplace. Realizing she's genuinely upset, Wazoo inquires if she was raised in this area, given her talk about returning home. Mel confirms this and asks if he really didn't come here on her husband's behalf. Wazoo assures her that he only came to investigate a rumored dragon sighting in the nearby town, never expecting that the dragon in question was actually her. He adds that now he can simply report to the guild master that the dragon wasn't dangerous, but rather the kind-hearted Mel, and close the case. Mir flies over to her mother and cuddles up to her, which helps Mel regain her composure, realizing how embarrassing it was to lose her temper like that. With Mel calmed down, Wazoo asks why she's here at her birthplace when her home is the castle on the mountain. He offers to listen if she wants to talk about it. Mel, tearing up, reveals that while she was busy with house chores, Ragnir cheated on her with a young red dragon. Wazoo is shocked and can't believe that Ragnir would do such a thing, especially when he has a beautiful wife and daughter. He flatters Mel, saying she would be a real beauty if she were human. Flattered by the compliment, Mel explains that she returned to her birthplace to discuss the situation with her mother and is currently waiting for her arrival. Understanding the situation, Wazoo gently asks if there's any chance for her and Ragnir to reconcile, especially for Mir's sake. Mel insists that it would be impossible unless Ragnir apologizes, as he's clearly in the wrong. Wazoo agrees that Ragnir should apologize, but asks if she's sure it wasn't a misunderstanding. Mel angrily retorts that it doesn't matter how he looks at it. Her husband was definitely close to that female dragon, though she admits she doesn't have any concrete evidence. Seeing a potential opening, Wazoo smiles and offers to bring Ragnir to her, so they can talk things out properly. He suggests this would not only help calm down the townspeople but also be better for Mir. He adds that if Mel doesn't want to be left alone with Ragnir, he can stay as a witness. Mel, unable to hide her happiness at the idea, tells Wazoo he's free to do as he pleases. She can't reject his request to meet Ragnir. Wazoo notices that despite everything, Mel seems eager to reconcile with her husband. He tells Mir that the mountain castle is pretty far, so she should stay with her mother while he goes to fetch Ragnir. After bidding them goodbye, he takes off running toward the castle, promising to return soon. As he leaves, Mel reflects on how kind Wazoo is, thinking to herself that he's the type of human who would never abandon someone in trouble. Wazoo continues his run and finally reaches the castle. He calls out for Ragnir to see if he's home and eventually finds him sleeping in his room. Ragnir stirs and sees Wazoo standing there. He immediately asks why Wazoo is there and why Mir isn't with him. Wazoo briefly explains that Mir is with her mother, who left her home because Ragnir had cheated on her. Ragnir, clearly surprised, denies the accusation and asks where Mel is now. Wazoo tells him to calm down and explains that he can lead him to Mel, but first, he needs to know what Ragnir plans to do when he finds her. Ragnir responds that he will bring her back. Wazoo presses him on how he plans to apologize. Ragnir, puffing up with pride, scoffs at the idea of apologizing and insists that as a dragon king, he shouldn't have to do so. He believes that simply telling Mel to return should be enough. Wazoo, seeing Ragnir's attitude, thinks he's hopeless and explains that while this might work with subjects, it won't with a personal issue between husband and wife. Before proceeding, Wazoo asks who Ragnir was allegedly cheating with. Ragnir insists he wasn't cheating and clarifies that the dragon in question is Karel, a beautiful dragon who is popular among others. Karel had invited him for meals several times, which he couldn't refuse because his friends were present. Wazoo then questions if Ragnir had several drinks with Karel and if she made advances on him. Ragnir confirms this but swears that nothing happened, although Mel saw them together and left home in anger. Wazoo scolds Ragnir, saying that Mel's anger is understandable. Even if nothing happened, Ragnir's interaction with Karel is enough to warrant Mel's anger. Ragnir argues that he shouldn't have to apologize, but Wazoo insists he needs to set aside his Dragon King pride and consider how he would feel if Mel were out with a young male dragon and became intimate with him. Ragnir, infuriated, spits fire in Wazoo's direction, but Wazoo urges him to listen. He explains that if Mel came to bring him back without apologizing, Ragnir would probably be enraged, which is exactly how Mel will feel if he doesn't apologize. Wazoo presses him to be honest about whether he could forgive Mel if the roles were reversed. Ragnir admits he couldn't. Wazoo points out that this is precisely what Mel will be feeling now, and it will only worsen if Ragnir doesn't make amends. Understanding what he needs to do, Ragnir agrees. Wazoo asks if he can stay at the castle for the night, having run all day without rest. Ragnir, apologizing for his earlier attitude, agrees and also asks about Wazoo's romantic life. Wazoo replies that he only has Mir by his side. Ragnir wonders why someone who seems to understand women so well hasn't managed to find a lover. Wazoo, feeling a bit down, tells him not to discuss it as it's a sore spot. Ragnir remarks that if he were a dragon, he'd surely be popular. The next morning, Wazoo wakes up with the sun and prepares to head out. He surprises Ragnir by lifting him, which shocks the Dragon King. Wazoo explains that carrying him is much faster than flying. Ragnir, frightened, asks what Wazoo plans to do, but Wazoo reassures him he won't die and hurls him towards the mountain where Mel is staying. Then Wazoo runs off to catch up. When Wazoo arrives at the cave, he finds Ragnir being scolded by a furious dragon. Wazoo realizes this must be Mel's mother, Megal, who is angry over how Ragnir has treated her daughter. Ragnir tries to explain that it's a misunderstanding, but Megal is not impressed. Wazoo steps in, introducing himself as the human Megal was referring to, and Mir rushes over to hug him. Megal, having heard about Wazoo from her daughter, scrutinizes him but is reassured by Mel's trust in him. She also mentions that Mel plans to marry Mir to Wazoo when she grows up, which leaves Wazoo confused about the situation. Megal reveals that she is the former Dragon Queen, which adds to Wazoo's bewilderment. As the conversation unfolds, Wazoo realizes he's stumbled into a tricky situation. He tries to diffuse the tension by claiming it's a misunderstanding and suggests that Ragnir and Mel simply need to be honest and resolve their issues. Mel agrees, but only if Ragnir apologizes sincerely. Ragnir exits the cave, looking disheveled, and asks Wazoo what he should do next. Wazoo advises him to follow through with his apology and adapt to Mel's wishes, a piece of advice Wazoo learned from his father's sayings. Ragnir, feeling humbled, asks if there are any high-class places for dragons. Wazoo explains that while there are no such places for dragons, human males often take their partners to nice restaurants to apologize and make amends. Ragnir wonders if such places exist in human towns. Wazoo confirms they do, but notes that bringing dragons into such establishments would be impossible. Ragnir then suggests that if that's the case, there will be no issue, and he heads back inside the cave. Ragnir kneels before Mel and Megal, apologizing for the trouble he caused. He promises to cut ties with Karel and to take better care of Mel, inviting them to Linux Town as a gesture of his apology. He describes Linux as a place where they can rest, enjoy good food, and beautiful scenery. Mel is eager to visit Linux, delighted to see her husband and daughter after a long time, and Megal agrees, noting the need for a break. Wazoo then inquires about how they will enter the town given their sizes. Megal explains that they can transform into human forms, thanks to their substantial mana. Wazoo is amazed as the dragons shift into human forms. Megal instructs him to lead the way to Linux Town, and Wazoo agrees, ready to guide them on their journey. Salona sits on a quiet bench, the exhaustion from 10 days of travel weighing heavily on her. She glances at the guild card in her hand, the same one she's been carrying since she left her village, and wonders where Wazoo could be. Her thoughts drift to the possibility of him being on a ship, heading to some distant land. But she quickly reminds herself that without his guild card, he's likely in a tight spot. Her mind races, imagining Wazoo lost and alone, and she thinks of a large city nearby. He might not even be on this continent if he's not there. The thought of reuniting with him fills her with a mix of hope and trepidation. She dreams of traveling together, sharing adventures, and eventually sharing their lives, until her thoughts turn more intimate and she imagines kissing him. Blushing, she shakes her head, trying to dispel these fantasies. She doubts that he would have room in his heart for her now, especially if he's moved on and formed new bonds. She's not even sure if he would forgive her after the way she rejected his feelings. Just then, the aroma of fresh bread wafts through the air, pulling Salona from her thoughts. Her stomach growls, a reminder of her hunger after days of inadequate food. She notices a young girl, Lula, with a bundle of bread and watches as a man talks to her about it. Lula thanks him and smiles, mentioning that these breads come from the best bakery in town, one approved by her father. The man comments on the long walk to her home and the possibility that the bread might get cold. Lula laughs and explains that the bread is delicious even when cold, and she enjoys it every morning. As the man leaves, Lula approaches Salona and offers her a piece of bread. Salona, surprised by the offer, asks if she's not supposed to deliver the bread to her father. Lula cheerfully replies that it's fine. She often nibbles on 1 or 2 pieces herself, and her father doesn't mind. Salona, touched by the girl's kindness and her pure, untainted eyes, insists on paying for the bread. Lula waves off the payment, instead offering Salona a place to stay at her inn in Linux Town, which is not too far away. Salona, intrigued, asks if the inn is located in that large fortress city. Lula confirms it is and mentions that the inn is called the Breeze of Light Inn, claiming it has the best lodging and food around. Salona agrees that it would be a good idea to visit. Realizing she hasn't introduced herself, Salona offers her name. Lula introduces herself in return and asks if Salona is an elf. Salona confirms that she is, and Lula expresses excitement, noting that while many adventurers stay at the inn, she rarely sees an elf. Salona comments that elves generally stay in their villages unless something significant happens. Lula inquires about the reason for Salona's visit to the trade harbor. Salona blushes and admits she's searching for a particular man and considering heading to Linux. She adds that if she can't find him there, she might have to give up. Lula offers to help, noting that many people visit her in daily. She asks for more details about the man. Salona describes Wazoo as aloof but cheerful, kind and strong, and someone she feels a strong desire to protect. She describes his appearance: black hair that reaches his nape, a worn-out black robe, and a small dragon resting on his head. Lula's eyes widen as she asks if the dragon's name is Mir. Surprised, Salona confirms it is. Lula explains that Wazoo is staying at the Breeze of Light Inn, mentioning that he had lost his guild card and was working under her father because of it. Salona, overwhelmed by emotions, slumps to the ground, her cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and relief. The realization that she actually found Wazoo, despite her doubts, fills her with an intense emotional weight. Lula, noticing her distress, urges her to hurry to Linux, but Salona hesitates, clutching the guild card tightly. When Lula asks if Salona journeyed all this way just to return the card, Salona admits that she did. She feels a deep sense of responsibility for Wazoo's predicament, worried about his trouble without the card. Lula, curious, inquires whether Salona used magic or fast travel to reach the harbor. Salona's face reddens as she confesses that she walked the entire way, driven by her desire to help Wazoo. Lula laughs, recognizing Salona's devotion. She remarks that Salona clearly loves Wazoo, which causes Salona to blush even more. She admits that while her heart is conflicted, she's not quite ready to join Wazoo's harem. Salona feels she might have missed her chance, especially if Wazoo has already moved on to new relationships. Lula reassures Salona, revealing that Wazoo is still traveling alone, aside from Mir. This news brings a hopeful sparkle to Salona's eyes. Lula informs her that Wazoo had to leave town for a job given by her father but invites Salona to wait at her inn until he returns. Salona, torn and nervous, begins to walk towards the town, her mind racing with questions about whether Wazoo will accept her if she waits. She wonders if they could go on adventures together again, imagining a future with him. As they approach the city, Salona spots Wazoo from a distance. Her heart sinks when she sees him walking with several new companions. Tears well up in her eyes as she contemplates the possibility that he has already forged new friendships. The sight of him with others makes her feel as though she has been left behind, her fears confirmed. Lula encourages her to go after Wazoo, but Salona turns away, her resolve crumbling. She mutters that she's only there to return the guild card and laments her other obligations. She hands the card to Lula, asking her to deliver it, and flees from the scene. Salona runs until she reaches a nearby tree, where she collapses, breathless and distraught. She is bewildered by her own actions. She wonders why she ran away when all she had to do was approach him, apologize, and ask to rejoin him. The feelings leave her frustrated and isolated. As she sobs quietly under the tree, Salona realizes that her heart aches not just from missing Wazoo, but from the profound emotions she has developed for him. It dawns on her that she has fallen deeply for him, a realization that both comforts and tortures her in equal measure. While enjoying tea at the inn, the guild master Reagan found himself in disbelief. The idea that the individuals seated before him were the Dragon King and his family seemed almost too fantastical to be true. Wazoo, maintaining a calm demeanor, reassured him with a smile, affirming that it was indeed the truth. Megal, growing increasingly impatient, insisted that Ragnir demonstrate his true identity. Ragnir complied and transformed back into his dragon form, filling the room with his imposing presence. The sudden shift left Reagan stunned, causing him to fall from his chair in shock. His fear quickly turned to acceptance as he requested Ragnir to return to his human form. With Reagan now convinced, Wazoo shifted the conversation to practical matters. He inquired about the reward he was due, including a rank up and a new guild card. Additionally, he asked if Reagan could recommend any excellent restaurants in the area. As Wazoo and his companions prepared to leave, he noted that Reagan would personally guide them around the city the following day. He quietly advised Ragnir to make the most of this opportunity. For now, he suggested they spend the night at the Breeze of Light Inn. Just as they were about to head out, Lula arrived and approached Wazoo. She relayed that she had encountered a girl named Salona on her way to the inn. Salona had asked her to deliver a guild card to Wazoo. Upon inspecting the card, Wazoo confirmed it was indeed his. He wondered if Salona had come all this way simply to return it. The next day, Mel and Megal were exploring the bustling town with genuine curiosity. Mel marveled at the plethora of interesting sights and activities, remarking how a human town could be so vibrant and engaging. Megal, equally fascinated, admitted that it had been quite some time since she had visited a large town like this. During their exploration, Mel spotted a pair of shoes that caught her eye. She hesitated, worried about whether she would be able to wear them after she transformed back to her dragon size. Megal reassured her that simply enjoying the experience was valuable in itself. Kayla and Emma, who were assisting them on their tour, led them to a toy hunting shop. Inside, Megal enthusiastically participated in the games, skillfully hitting targets with her shots. Mel, on the other hand, struggled to hit any targets and looked disheartened. Observing her disappointment, the shop owner kindly offered her a consolation prize, which lifted her spirits. The group continued their tour through the entertainment district, bustling with activity and crowds. Megal's attention was drawn to a grand building, and she asked what it was. Before Kayla could answer, Emma whispered to her, reminding her that Megal and Mel were still upset with the Dragon King for his past actions. Kayla responded to Megal, explaining that the building was just a large house and refraining from mentioning that it was the most prestigious brothel in the town. Meanwhile, Ragnir was busy ordering a substantial amount of food at a restaurant. Reagan, slightly concerned, asked if he had overordered. Wazoo, with a hint of humor, reminded Reagan that their guests were dragons, who had larger appetites. Reagan acknowledged that their current forms were close to human size, but agreed to help Wazoo find suitable clothes for Ragnir. Wazoo was counting on Reagan to select the perfect attire to impress Mel. Reagan assured him he could be trusted. Wazoo prepared to leave, and Ragnir, anxious, requested that he not be left alone. Wazoo advised Ragnir to rely on himself more, noting that the issues with Mel were his own responsibility. He encouraged Ragnir, suggesting that Kayla and Emma were likely making Mel and Megal feel welcome, and their anger would subside soon. As Wazoo left, Reagan reminded him to attend the guild the following day to re-register his guild card. As Wazoo walked through the streets, he puzzled over why Salona had gone through the effort to return his guild card, but hadn't come to meet him. He felt a pang of worry, thinking perhaps she harbored negative feelings toward him. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice calling him. It was the goddess. She teased him for being so focused on Salona while seemingly neglecting her. Wazoo, recognizing the goddess's voice, produced the guild card and addressed her. The goddess expressed her displeasure at Wazoo's preoccupation with Salona, but Wazoo reassured her, saying he was indeed happy to see her and was merely jesting. The goddess inquired about his new companions, wondering if he had formed a party with the dragons. Wazoo explained that he hadn't, but he had made some new friends along the way. The goddess knew that Salona misunderstood the situation. She told Wazoo that he shouldn't worry too much about it. She then decided to shift the topic, leaving the specifics of Salona's feelings unresolved. Mel and Megal savored the exquisite food, reveling in the luxurious feast. Mel, feeling a mix of relief and contentment, thanked her husband for treating her to such an indulgent experience. She expressed her forgiveness and her decision to move past the earlier misunderstanding, admitting that her initial suspicions had been misplaced. She acknowledged her mistake in jumping to conclusions and promised that if he were to be seen with another female dragon in a similar context again, she would not be as forgiving. Ragnir gazed at her with deep affection, moved by her words. Mel continued, emphasizing the importance of trust and assuring him that while she had been wrong, her love for him remained steadfast. Meanwhile, Emma settled the payment for Wazu's previous job, which left him visibly disappointed. Instead of receiving the full 30 gold coins he expected, he was given only 5. Emma explained that 10 gold coins were deducted to cover the cost of the Dragon King and his family's lavish feast the previous night, another 10 for their extended stay at the inn, and an additional 5 for their food expenses. Despite the reduction, Emma reassured Wazu that his guild rank had been elevated from F to C, a significant advancement that would allow him to take on more lucrative quests. Wazu expressed his gratitude, acknowledging the boost to his rank. Emma noted that Wazu's impressive abilities had made his ascent through the ranks almost automatic, without needing to undergo the usual rigorous tests. Emma reminded Wazu to make the most of his new rank and to pursue as many quests as possible. She also recalled that the guild master had promised to take Wazu to a special place that evening as a token of thanks for his efforts. When Wazu inquired about the nature of this special place, Emma hinted that it was a notable nighttime venue, though Wazu remained unsure. Returning to the inn, Wazu was greeted warmly by Kayla. He requested that she take care of Mir for him, as Reagan had summoned him. Kayla inquired why he did not leave Mir with the occupant of the room next to his, who was none other than the Dragon King and his family. Upon realizing Kayla was referring to them, Wazu found himself caught up in the hospitality Mel had extended to him and his companions. Mel expressed her gratitude for covering all their expenses, including future meals during their stay. Megal, on the other hand, remarked on the human tendency to require payment for everything, which Wazu accepted with a chuckle. As Wazu prepared to leave, Mir flew to him, looking distressed. Mel observed this and noted that Mir seemed reluctant for him to depart, unlike her husband. She reassured Mir that Wazu's loyalty would remain true and instructed the dragon to stay behind and behave. Wazu, touched by Mir's attachment, promised to return soon and instructed her to be a good girl in his absence. Wazu, puzzled and anxious, followed Reagan, who had hired a carriage for their journey. Reagan assured him that their destination was not far from the entertainment district and hinted at the various attractions the area offered: a casino, theater, pub, and more. Wazu, already feeling apprehensive, asked if Reagan was taking him to a place for drinks, apologizing in advance for his inability to handle alcohol well. Reagan reassured him that there were many activities other than drinking, and added that he intended to introduce Wazu to a girl or two as a reward for his successful completion of the investigation quest. When they arrived at their destination, Wazu's apprehension grew as he realized they were at the most prestigious brothel in town. He was alarmed and requested Reagan not to involve him in such activities, suggesting that if Reagan wanted to cheat on his wife, he should bring Ragnir instead. Reagan clarified that he had no intention of cheating on Kayla. His purpose was simply to visit the owner of the brothel, an old friend from his adventuring days. He reminded Wazu that, legally, he was considered an adult at 17 and should not act so naive, especially since he might have visited such places before. Wazu, feeling embarrassed, insisted that he had never been to such a place. Reagan then asked if Wazu was still a virgin, which caused Wazu to feel a pang of sadness over his inexperience. Reagan knocked on the door, announcing their arrival. The owner of the brothel, Garrett, greeted them warmly, noting that they had arrived earlier than expected. Reagan introduced Wazu to Garrett, highlighting his impressive accomplishments, including surviving a fight with an A-ranked party and speaking with the Dragon King as an equal. Garrett, recognizing Wazu's reputation, welcomed them inside and mentioned that he had prepared a special seat for his old friend. Wazu was taken aback by the opulence of the place. Observing Wazu's unease, Garrett inquired if everything was all right. Reagan explained that Wazu claimed to have never visited such an establishment before. Seated on the plush sofa, Garrett informed Wazu that he would be joining them as an adult after tonight. He proceeded to present a selection of women, offering Wazu the chance to choose anyone he fancied. Wazu, confused and nervous, asked what exactly Garrett meant. When pressed further about his preferences and whether he was uncomfortable with women or had someone else in mind, Wazu admitted he was still not ready for this. The atmosphere shifted when Tada descended the stairs and approached them. Garrett introduced her as his most beautiful flower and mentioned that she wished to accompany Wazu for the night. To Wazoo's surprise, Tada was the same girl he had once helped during a shopping incident. Tada, pleased that Wazoo remembered her, expressed her gratitude and explained her intent to develop a more intimate connection rather than remain just acquaintances. Wazoo, feeling embarrassed and overwhelmed, turned red. His nervousness drove him to gulp down Reagan's liquor in a single breath, which quickly led to him losing consciousness. When he awoke, he found himself lying in Tada's lap, her face smiling gently at him. Startled and apologetic, Wazoo tried to get up, but Tada reassured him that he had merely fainted from the alcohol. She handed him a glass of water and explained that he was in her private room within the mansion. Reagan had already left, she informed him. Wazoo, feeling remorseful for causing trouble, thanked her. Tada, accustomed to dealing with inebriated clients, offered comfort. However, her actions took an unexpected turn when she began to slowly remove her clothes. Wazoo, shocked and uneasy, asked her what she was doing. Tada explained that she was preparing for an intimate encounter, as that was the nature of the establishment. Tada leaned closer to him, inviting him to explore his desires. Despite her assurances, Wazoo's heart was unsettled by the rapid pace of the situation. He expressed his discomfort and hesitation, feeling that things were moving too quickly for him. Tada looked at Wazoo with a mixture of surprise and concern, having never encountered someone so uninterested in taking advantage of her body in her line of work. Wazoo gently covered her with a nearby cloth and suggested they get to know each other better through conversation. He asked her to value herself more and not offer herself so easily. Her reaction was one of mild amusement and surprise. Tada had never before heard a client speak with such respect and kindness. She found his honesty both strange and endearing, realizing that she had tried to deceive someone who was genuinely kind-hearted. Tada admitted that she had been trying to meet him after witnessing his impressive defeat of 3 adventurers outside the Breeze of Light Inn. She had hoped to enlist his help due to his evident strength. When Wazoo asked if her request was related to the people who had pursued her, Tada nodded. She explained that these people were indeed a serious threat, and she had hoped Wazoo could offer some protection or support. Wazoo, understanding the gravity of her situation, assured her that he would handle the matter and that she need not worry. Tada then offered him a reward for his help, but Wazoo declined, saying that he did not need money. Instead, Tada clarified that her offer was not about monetary compensation, but about repaying him for his earlier kindness. She was willing to do anything in her power to assist him if he agreed to help her. Wazoo reassured her that he couldn't ignore someone who looked as lonely as she did. Tada became emotional, feeling exposed by his perceptiveness. She was embarrassed but grateful, realizing that Wazoo could see through her tough exterior to her underlying sadness. Wazoo listened intently as Tada shared her story, agreeing to reveal his own in return. Tada explained that she was working at the brothel to repay a significant debt her father owed. The people who had been pursuing her were indeed debt collectors, forceful and persistent, employing many men to intimidate and capture her if necessary. She had called out to Wazoo in her desperation, hoping his strength could protect her from these aggressors. Wazoo expressed his understanding and dismay at the brutality of the debt collectors. Tada revealed that her parents were doing everything they could to raise the money to help her, but the situation was dire. Her decision to work in the brothel was a last resort to support her family and eventually pay off the debt, allowing her to return home. Despite her predicament, Tada was wary of Wazoo confronting the collectors directly. She feared that his involvement could jeopardize his safety and possibly force him to leave the city. Instead, she requested only his protection from her assailants, promising that if he helped, she would strive to repay her father's debt and secure her own freedom. Wazoo assured her that he would not intervene in a way that might put him at odds with the collectors, but he committed to protecting her. He told her she could call on him at any time if she felt threatened. His promise was sincere, as he could see the seriousness and determination in her eyes. He vowed to support her efforts with everything he could. Tada's smile was warm and genuine as she expressed her gratitude to Wazoo for his kindness. Curious about his motivations, she inquired why he had become an adventurer. Wazoo hesitated, not having a clear answer, but eventually mentioned that his goal was to build a harem. Tada found this aspiration endearing and reassured him that she believed he could achieve it quickly, given his kind nature. Wazoo, however, noted that despite such encouragement from others, he remained alone. To his surprise, Tada playfully asked if she could be the first member of his harem. His reaction was one of shock and blushing embarrassment. Seeing his discomfort, Tada quickly clarified that she was only joking, feeling unworthy of such a role. She acknowledged his kindness and assured him that he was as gentle as she had thought. With their time together still ahead, Tada suggested they make the most of it by discussing the city, its good restaurants, and scenic spots. Wazoo, having recently arrived in Linux, was eager to learn more about the area. Tada happily agreed to share her knowledge, her giggles filling the room with a light-hearted atmosphere. As night gave way to day, the soft chirping of birds outside the brothel woke Tada. She reflected on the previous night, realizing with a touch of wonder that Wazoo had respected her boundaries, even though they had slept in the same room. She admired his genuine care, noting that it was a first for her. When Wazoo awoke, he found himself alone, with a business card left behind by Tada inviting him to visit again. Pleased that she had enjoyed his company, he prepared to leave, thinking of returning to Mir. Just then, a demi-human girl burst into the room. Angrily, she chastised Wazoo for thinking that Tada could seriously care about him simply because they had spent a night together. Wazoo, taken aback, tried to explain that Tada herself had asked him to come back, showing her message as proof. The girl was astonished, noting how rare it was for Tada to give such a message to someone like him. She explained that Tada and others were involved in something significant, and they couldn't afford to have their plans disrupted by an outsider. The girl, clearly protective of Tada, was adamant that Wazoo shouldn't be privy to the details of their situation. Ignoring his pleas, she threw him out of the brothel, citing her role in protecting Tada from potential threats. As Wazoo left, he understood her concern but felt frustrated by the abrupt dismissal. Mir, perched on Wazoo's head, was clearly in a sulk. He tried to lift her spirits with a playful tone, assuring her that his absence was nothing to be upset about. He emphasized that nothing inappropriate had happened and gently teased her about possibly being jealous. The mention of jealousy only seemed to ignite Mir's frustration, and she responded by scratching his face. Realizing he might have pushed her too far, Wazoo quickly shifted tactics, promising to make it up to her with a special treat. He mentioned that Tada had shared recommendations for some excellent places around the city, hoping to divert Mir's attention from her jealousy. However, hearing another woman's name made Mir even more upset, leading her to scratch his face again. At that moment, a familiar voice called out Wazoo's name. Both he and Mir turned to see Tada approaching with a warm smile. She greeted him with a sense of pleasant surprise, noting how fortuitous it was to run into him again so soon. Wazoo, equally surprised, responded that he hadn't expected to see her so quickly. When Tada asked what he was doing, Wazoo casually mentioned that he was out on a date with Mir. Tada, with a teasing tone, remarked on their apparent passion. She then introduced her bodyguard, a cat girl named Nenya. Wazoo extended his hand for a handshake, however. Nenya responded with a firm slap to his hand, clearly displaying her disapproval. As Tada reassured Nenya not to be too harsh with Wazoo, he took a deep breath and accepted the reality of his unwelcome status. Nenya, with a commanding presence, whispered something to Mir before taking her away. Wazoo was left bewildered as Nenya instructed him to carry her bags if he wanted to get closer to Tada, with a firm grip on his shirt and an impatient tone. Confused but determined to make the best of the situation, Wazoo turned to Tada and asked what was going on with Nenya. Tada explained that Nenya might just be trying to give them some private time, though she wasn't entirely sure. They decided to continue their shopping, with Wazoo curious about what Tada was looking for. Tada explained she wanted to buy cosmetics, clothes, and accessories for the girls in the mansion as a gesture of gratitude for their kindness. They arrived at a quaint jewelry shop, where Tada admired the carefully crafted pieces. Wazoo was equally impressed by the shop's offerings. However, his moment of admiration was interrupted when he noticed someone watching them from outside. When he made eye contact, the stranger quickly hid. Troubled by the encounter, Wazoo instructed Tada to stay inside the shop and not venture outside while he investigated. Wazoo followed the suspicious figure to a nearby building, where he confronted a group of individuals who had been lurking. They revealed their intent to capture Tada and claimed he was too late to save her. A skirmish ensued, and Wazoo fought fiercely, dispatching the thugs with relative ease. As the last of the attackers fell, Nenya arrived on the scene, having heard from the owner and others about Wazoo's strength. Nenya was initially surprised by Wazoo's capabilities, acknowledging that he was stronger than she had anticipated. She explained that she had come to assess whether Wazoo was reliable enough to protect Tada and had been prepared to intervene if necessary. Satisfied with his performance, Nenya admitted that she now trusted Wazoo. The real revelation came when Nenya disclosed the truth behind Tada's predicament. She revealed that Tada's supposed debt was a fabrication created by the city's corrupt lord. This malevolent ruler had invented the debt and imposed an unpayable sum, making Tada's body collateral. Nenya described the city lord as the worst she had ever encountered, and Wazoo was stunned by the gravity of this revelation. Tada grew increasingly anxious as she waited in the jewelry store. Wazoo had been gone for a while, and she couldn't help but worry. When he finally returned, she rushed to him, relieved but concerned. Grabbing his arm, she scolded him for leaving her alone, reminding him that he was supposed to be her bodyguard. Wazoo didn't respond directly. Instead, he pulled her closer, placing her in front of him with a reassuring look. He declared that she didn't need to worry anymore because he was by her side, and she was safe with him now. Tada was surprised by his sudden intensity, but she smiled to ease the tension, thanking him for his passionate words, which she found both amusing and comforting. She reflected on the story Nenya had shared with Wazoo earlier, about how her parents had been doing everything possible to protect her, even cutting down on necessities to pay off a fake debt. Tada had taken the drastic step of selling her body, and along the way, she had found allies like Garrett, Nenya, and Reagan. They were all working together to gather proof that her debt was a fabrication, getting closer to uncovering the truth. But the corrupt city lord, whose lie was about to be exposed, had been sending mercenaries to capture her. This is where Wazoo had become a part of their story, vowing to help her by confronting the lord. As they continued browsing the store, Tada searched for something specific. She asked the shopkeeper for help in finding souvenirs, and the shopkeeper, with a smile, suggested they look for matching items for couples. This comment made Tada blush, and even Wazoo seemed a bit embarrassed. Tada, still holding onto his arm, asked if she looked like an ordinary girl walking around like this. Wazoo reassured her that she not only looked like an ordinary girl, but was far more beautiful than that. Tada blushed even more, explaining that wasn't what she meant when she asked. Suddenly, Tada's thoughts drifted to her past, to the room where she had worked as a professional. A wave of sadness washed over her as she remembered how she had thought her heart had died when she started selling her body. But when she met Wazoo, it felt as if a flower had bloomed within her. While lost in thought, her eyes caught sight of a pair of elegant rings, and she found herself enchanted by them. Wazoo, meanwhile, had wandered off to another section of the store, looking for something for Mir. Tada remained fixated on the rings and asked the shopkeeper about the engravings on them. The shopkeeper explained that the rings bore ancient letters. The man's ring said, "I hold you dear," and the woman's ring read, "I look only at you." Tada stared at the rings, emotions swirling within her, as she wondered if it was too much to hope for something so pure. She looked at Wazoo and questioned whether someone as tainted as she was deserved to make such a wish. Feeling her heart race, she bravely asked Wazoo if he would put the ring on. Wazoo, though surprised, agreed to wear the ring at her request. As they looked at the rings on their fingers, Tada couldn't help but marvel at how fast her heart was beating, just like an ordinary girl in love. She asked if Wazoo would accept the ring as a gift from her. When he asked if she was really giving it to him, she clarified that it wasn't meant to be anything deep, just a token of her gratitude for his protection. Wazoo, however, mentioned that he usually fought barehanded and might break it. Tada suggested he could wear it only when they met, so it wouldn't hinder him in battle. Wazoo thanked her for the gift and promised to wear it whenever they were together. Tada blushed at his words, feeling both embarrassed and bold for making such a gesture. She wondered how she could have done something so forward and felt a wave of shame, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the happiness that filled her heart. After finishing their shopping, Wazoo, Tada, and Nenya returned to the mansion. Tada, feeling a bit guilty, apologized to Wazoo for making him escort her all the way back. Wazoo smiled and reassured her that it was perfectly fine, reminding her that he was her bodyguard after all. Nenya, noticing Wazoo's dedication, praised him for doing a good job and added that they were counting on him in the future as well. Wazoo bid them goodbye and turned to leave. As he waved, Mir noticed a ring on his finger, prompting Wazoo to thank Tada once more for the gift. Nenya also noticed the ring and teased Tada, asking if she had given it to him. Tada quickly denied any deeper meaning, insisting it was just a gift. Later, when Wazoo and Mir arrived back at the inn, Mir's mood suddenly shifted. She became visibly upset and, with surprising strength, bit Wazoo's arm. Her mother, concerned by her daughter's unusual behavior, watched closely, wondering what had happened. Wazoo, startled and in pain, asked Mir what was wrong, assuring her that he wouldn't die even if she bit him with all her might. Mir then pointed at the ring on his finger, and Wazoo finally understood the source of her anger. In response, Mir struck him in the stomach, adding to his discomfort. Her mother intervened, urging Mir to stop before she caused any serious damage to the inn, reminding her that human buildings were fragile. Ragnir, Mir's father, joined in, angrily scolding Wazoo and warning that if Mir hadn't gotten angry, he would have punched Wazoo himself. Ragnir was upset that Wazoo had exchanged rings with a girl named Tada despite having captivated his daughter. Wazoo tried to defend himself, explaining that Tada had given him the ring as a simple present. Ragnir, however, remained suspicious, suggesting that as long as Wazoo continued being Tada's bodyguard, their relationship might grow more intimate. This comment made Mir even angrier, and she began pinching her father's face in frustration. Megal, Mir's grandmother, called Wazoo foolish and reminded him not to make her granddaughter uneasy. She decided to believe Wazoo's explanation, but she warned him that if he was lying, no matter how invincible he thought he was, she would gather all the dragons to punish him. Wazoo, genuinely frightened by the threat, hurriedly assured her that he was telling the truth. To smooth things over, Wazoo remembered that he had bought a souvenir for Mir. He presented her with a necklace, telling her that it would look beautiful on her. He also expressed his gratitude for all the help she had given him so far, apologizing for not repaying her sooner. Mir's eyes filled with tears as she admired the shining necklace, and she immediately hugged Wazoo, overwhelmed with emotion. Wazoo, confused by her reaction, asked if she was crying because she didn't like the gift. Megal reassured him that Mir was happy and that there was nothing to worry about. Mel, another of Mir's relatives, became emotional as well, touched by the fact that Wazoo had thought of Mir even while spending time with another woman. She called it true love. Ragnir, feeling a pang of jealousy, grumbled that Mir never showed such tears no matter what he gave her. That night, Mir insisted on sleeping in Wazoo's bed, and he found himself on the floor by morning, sore from the rough night. The next day, Wazoo was still feeling the effects of Mir's strength when Emma barged into his room, calling his name. She found him lying on the floor and accidentally gave him a glimpse of her pink underwear, which made her furious. She demanded to know if he wanted to die or if he preferred to take on an unreasonable quest as punishment. Faced with her anger, Wazoo quickly chose the latter, thinking it offered a better chance of survival. While they sat in the inn, Emma explained that a poison swamp had suddenly appeared in the forest south of Linux and was rapidly spreading. Although there were no casualties yet, the swamp posed a serious threat to Linux if it wasn't dealt with soon. Wazoo realized that she was looking for adventurers with poison resistance. Confidently, he mentioned that poison had no effect on him and that he could handle the quest. Emma, worried, asked what level of poison he could nullify. Wazoo showed her his guild card, proving that no poison could harm him. She called him a monster but handed over the quest details, urging him to take care of himself. As Wazoo prepared to leave, the Dragon King and his family gathered at the city gate to see him off. Wazoo explained that he couldn't bring Mir with him this time because the poison was supposed to be extremely strong. He gently told her that it wouldn't be right if anything bad happened to her, so she should stay and be a good girl until he returned. Megal mused that the unusually cloudy air of late made sense now, and Mel added that something must have triggered the swamp's appearance, warning Wazoo to be careful. Ragnir, uneasy about the situation, offered to accompany Wazoo, saying he had a bad feeling about the swamp. Wazoo asked if Ragnir was okay with poison, to which Ragnir angrily replied not to underestimate him. He acknowledged Wazoo's strength but insisted it was okay to rely on others sometimes. Besides, he had always wanted to go on an adventure with Wazoo. Ragnir then transformed into his dragon form and offered to fly Wazoo to the forest. Wazoo accepted, and they took off together. As they flew away, Megal voiced her concern that the poison swamp's sudden appearance and the unusually cloudy air suggested that someone was up to no good. Mel agreed, sensing that something evil was approaching. A group of A-rank adventurers, still nursing their wounds from their recent defeat at Wazoo's hands, sat on the street, grumbling amongst themselves. One of them, still seething with resentment, muttered that Wazoo was too full of himself. Another, wincing as he touched his still aching scars, complained that they could have taken him down if it hadn't been for that small dragon by his side. Their leader, trying to make sense of their loss, mentioned that there were rumors circulating about Wazoo being a genuine dragon tamer. He even mentioned hearing whispers that Wazoo might have tamed the Dragon King itself, though they were all baffled as to how such a feat could have been accomplished. As they stewed in their frustration, their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a mysterious figure. The adventurers, still fixated on their earlier defeat, speculated that Wazoo might have consumed the Red Orb, a legendary artifact rumored to grant immense power but at the cost of one's sanity. One of them scoffed, saying that no one could possibly remain sane after consuming the orb. The mysterious figure, who had now drawn close, laughed and praised the adventurer for his sharp insight. The group, on edge, demanded to know who the stranger was, but he simply ignored their question, instead talking about the Red Orb. He claimed that the orb had evolved, that it now granted power without the usual side effects. The leader of the adventurers, growing more suspicious, demanded to know who this man was. The stranger finally answered, claiming to be nothing more than a merchant. The adventurers were skeptical, unwilling to believe such a claim. But the merchant insisted, revealing that he had the orb in his possession and was considering selling it at a high price in the city. However, he offered them a discount. One of the adventurers, still suspicious, told the merchant to mind his own business, but the allure of power was too strong to ignore. The merchant then produced the Red Orb, offering each of them one, and promised that it would grant them the strength to defeat even the Dragon King. Stunned by the sight of the Red Orb, the adventurers quickly changed their tune, eagerly asking if the discount still stood. The merchant, sensing their desperation, handed an orb to each of them. As they marveled at the power now within their grasp, the merchant casually asked if they knew the location of the mansion belonging to the lord of the city. Ragnir and Wazoo arrived at the forest, and the sight that greeted them was ominous. Smoke rose above, and even from high up, Wazoo could smell the awful stench emanating from the poisonous, purple miasma that seemed intent on corrupting the entire forest. Ragnir, sensing the severity of the situation, suggested using his fire breath to incinerate the miasma and cleanse the forest. However, Wazoo quickly stopped him, pointing out that burning the forest down would turn it into a barren wasteland, which would be unfair to the land and its inhabitants. Ragnir, perplexed by Wazoo's calm demeanor, asked what his plan was if they found the swamp. After all, Wazoo couldn't use magic. Wazoo, however, was focused on finding the source of the miasma first. Ragnir, intrigued by Wazoo's confidence, transformed into his human form to observe him more closely, curious to see the depth of his strength. As they ventured deeper into the forest, everything was shrouded in the purple smoke from the swamp. Wazoo remarked that finding any animals would be impossible, as not even insects could survive in such a toxic environment. Ragnir, feeling increasingly uncomfortable from the miasma, asked Wazoo if he wasn't affected. Wazoo, to Ragnir's surprise, said that the miasma smelled like fresh citrus to him. Ragnir, bewildered by Wazoo's adaptability, asked what kind of inhuman power he possessed. Wazoo explained that after being saved by Mir from the brink of death, his body started changing in ways he couldn't fully understand. Whether it was the food Mir gave him or the intervention of a goddess who appeared in his guild card, something had transformed him. Ragnir speculated that perhaps Wazoo's strong desire to live had given him this power. Wazoo, however, laughed it off, saying that he hadn't even undergone any special training and had merely survived by eating anything he could find when he was starving. including strange mushrooms and random bones. Even now, his stats changed every time he consumed something unusual, though he wasn't sure if that made him stronger or just more peculiar. Ragnar found Wazu's story fascinating, having never heard anything like it in his centuries of life, and suggested that Wazu might have a unique ability to draw people to him. Wazu, taken aback, joked that he still had no friends, to which Ragnar pointed out that he considered Wazu a friend. Wazu, slightly embarrassed, clarified that he meant human friends, prompting Ragnar to remind him that he was currently in human form. Their conversation shifted as they approached the swamp, where the miasma was even stronger. Wazu, still unaffected, assured Ragnar that he was fine. Suddenly, they spotted something moving in the distance. Wazu realized that Mel had been right. The source of the poisonous swamp had appeared to confront them. A monstrous creature emerged, its bodily fluids corroding the ground and expanding the swamp. Ragnar warned Wazu not to touch the creature, as even a single drop of its fluid would be lethal. But Wazu, ever bold, decided to punch the creature instead. His hand penetrated the creature's fluid body, and after feeling something solid inside, he struck it again, ultimately defeating it. Ragnar was stunned by Wazu's audacity and strength. Wazu, pleased with his success, admitted that he had been worried when his hands initially seemed to slip through the creature's body. Ragnar, amazed, remarked that Wazu had made the creature seem like a small fry. Wazu nonchalantly agreed, confirming that it was, indeed, a small fry. As the creature dissolved, Wazu found a red marble on the ground, which reminded him of something similar he had seen before, though he couldn't be certain. The orb suddenly broke on its own, and Ragnar suggested that they leave now that the threat was dealt with. But Wazu had other plans. There was still the matter of the poison swamp. Wazu recalled Emma's advice about creating barriers around large poison swamps and then burning them down, a method not unlike what Ragnar had proposed. However, Wazu had a different idea. He sat down and touched the swamp, much to Ragnar's alarm. Ignoring Ragnar's protests, Wazu tasted the toxic liquid and remarked that it had a sweet and sour flavor, like citrus. Then, he shocked Ragnar by suggesting that he would drink the entire swamp. Without waiting for a response, Wazu began drinking the swamp's poisonous contents, much to Ragnar's horror. In a matter of minutes, Wazu had consumed it all, leaving the forest safe from the spreading poison. Ragnar, nearly sick with worry, scolded Wazu for his reckless behavior. Wazu, however, smiled and assured him that everything was fine, the forest was safe, and Linux wouldn't be affected. Just as Ragnar was about to respond, the ground began to shake, and a dazzling light enveloped Wazu. He felt warm and heard a voice thanking him for his actions before he fell unconscious. Ragnar, concerned, noticed that Wazu's bulging stomach had returned to normal. He carefully picked up Wazu, realizing that this man had once again drawn something extraordinary to himself. As Ragnar flew back to Linux Town with Wazu on his back, he reflected on Wazu's far-from-ordinary powers. Despite his ignorance of how ordinary people acted, Wazu was a kind and soft-hearted person who only wanted to use his strength to protect others. Ragnar finally understood why his daughter adored Wazu so much. In that moment, he decided to fully acknowledge Wazu as a man worthy of his daughter's affection. He promised that he would always lend Wazu his strength whenever he needed it, and vowed that they would be the best of friends from now on. The next day, Reagan entered Wazu's room, finding him looking pale and sluggish as he lay on the bed. Reagan commented on how he knew he could always count on Wazu, even for handling the poison swamp. Noting Wazu's condition, Reagan asked if he was suffering from a stomach ache, realizing that Wazu must have endured quite a bit by drinking all the poison from the swamp. Before Wazu could respond, Reagan apologized for sending him on such demanding quests, acknowledging that despite Wazu's extraordinary strength, he shouldn't push himself too hard. He promised a reward later and advised Wazu to rest properly for the day. Wazu agreed but mentioned that Nenya had visited him earlier that morning, saying Tada wanted to meet him again. Reagan inquired if Wazu was getting along well with Tada, and was reassured when Wazu explained that Tada wanted to thank him for resolving the poison swamp issue. Reagan confirmed that Linux Town would have been in grave danger if the swamp had been left unchecked. He then brought up Tada's situation, asking if Wazu was aware of her debt to the city lord. Wazoo affirmed he knew about it thanks to Nenya. Reagan revealed that he had gathered enough evidence to take the city lord down for various corrupt activities beyond just Tada's case. They planned to sue him first thing the next day. Wazoo was thrilled by the news, seeing it as a chance for Tada to be free and possibly making his first human friend. Reagan, however, expressed concern that the city lord might attempt something drastic that night, such as kidnapping Tada. He asked Wazoo to stay by her side to prevent any such actions. Wazoo assured Reagan that he could be trusted to protect Tada, though he was still feeling unwell. He then promptly vomited. Reagan, exasperated, told Wazoo not to be sick in his inn. After a while, Wazoo heads out towards Tada's mansion. The streets feel heavy as his body rebels against him, a stark reminder that his immunity to negative statuses might have been overestimated. Struggling, he pulls out his guild card and asks the goddess for an explanation. Her response is sharp and irritated. She shares his confusion about the current state of affairs. She then questions why another goddess, the goddess of Mother Earth, is present in their shared space. The revelation that this is the goddess in question shocks Wazoo. The goddess of Mother Earth interjects, defending her presence and questioning the other goddess's objections. Wazoo, slightly embarrassed, explains that he had hoped for a harem, so her arrival should be acceptable. The goddess of Mother Earth thanks him for his heroics in saving the forest and preventing its destruction. Deeply moved by Wazoo's dedication and kindness, she decides to bestow him with her divine protection as a sign of gratitude. Wazoo tries to refuse, not wanting any further blessings, but she insists and the blessing is granted. As he checks his guild card, Wazoo notices that his humanity has dropped further, now down to 78%. He asks the goddess if this recent change is causing his current sickness. She confirms that it is, referring to the symptoms as growing pains, and assures him that his body will adjust in time. She then suggests he should rest, but Wazoo, despite his discomfort, insists that he must proceed to the mansion as soon as possible. Just then, someone bumps into him. Wazoo apologizes and realizes it's the same merchant in the black cloak he had encountered before. The merchant comments on Wazoo's pallor and offers an antidote or some regular medicine. Though tempted, Wazoo declines, mentioning he would prefer to rest. The merchant smiles knowingly and then laughs, revealing he had misjudged Wazoo's carefree demeanor. He introduces himself as Shiro, and after a brief, enigmatic exchange, he departs, suggesting they might meet again. Confused by the strange encounter, Wazoo refocuses on his priority, ensuring Tada's safety. As Wazoo enters Tada's mansion, he is met by Nenya, who is visibly distressed. Her concern is palpable as she reprimands him for his delayed arrival, clearly worried about the possibility of him being poisoned by the swamp. Despite his attempts to downplay his condition with a weak apology, Nenya's anxiety is evident. She notices his pale appearance and insists that, given the gravity of the situation, he must be in peak condition for the imminent threat. However, before Wazoo can respond, he collapses, falling unconscious to the floor. Nenya's panic escalates as she rushes to him, urgently shaking him in an attempt to revive him. Outside, the town is in turmoil. Monsters flood the streets, and people are transforming into various monstrous forms. In the midst of this chaos, the merchant, cloaked in darkness, watches with a deranged smile. He reflects on the fact that, despite having 4 red orbs, the transformations did not produce the results he had hoped for. Nonetheless, he finds satisfaction in the disorder he has orchestrated, anticipating that it will bring a dramatic twist to the night's events.
Reagan is sitting in his inn when Orlando bursts in, clearly agitated. He tells Reagan that they have a serious problem. Curious, Reagan asks what has him so worked up. Orlando explains that a report just came in from an adventurer who returned, stating that goblins are headed toward the southern borders of Linux. Initially, Reagan isn't too concerned, saying goblins aren't much of a threat. However, Orlando quickly informs him that more than 1,000 goblins are on their way, making the situation far more alarming. While the goblin army charges toward Linux, Wazoo is resting in Tada's lap, fast asleep. He eventually wakes up and, still a bit disoriented, asks where he is. Tada explains that he collapsed on his way home. Wazoo, feeling guilty, sits up and apologizes for causing her trouble, but Tada reassures him that it's no trouble at all. She mentions that the ordeal with the poison swamp must have taken a toll on him, especially considering it affected him despite his incredible strength. Suddenly, Wazoo panics, remembering the presence of another goddess with him. He asks Tada if he still looks like a human and insists her to check. He urges her to touch him and examine him closely, explaining that this is important. Tada responds playfully, patting his head and pinching his cheeks. Wazoo, still serious, asks if she notices anything strange about him. Tada leans closer and teasingly remarks on how cute he is, almost kissing him until the door slams open. Nenya enters the room, carrying a bucket of water. Startled, Tada pulls back and thanks Nenya for coming. Nenya asks how Wazoo is doing, and Tada informs her that he's awake. Nenya expresses relief, admitting that she was worried. Wazoo notices Nenya's tail wagging uncontrollably and comments on it. She ignores the remark and places the water on the bed, mentioning that she spoke to the inn's owner, who told her Wazoo had dealt with the poisoned swamp. Wazoo confirms that he did. Tada then thanks him for saving the capital, but Wazoo, feeling flustered, downplays his actions, insisting it was the least he could do. Nenya, still in disbelief, asks how Wazoo managed to get rid of the poisoned swamp. She finds it hard to believe a human could do something like that. Tada, confused, questions whether Nenya is suggesting that Wazoo isn't human. Wazoo, amused, says he's glad he comes across as an average human. Tada, growing curious, asks if he's hiding something and what the secret behind his strength is. Wazoo insists there's nothing to hide. Tada, understanding, tells him that everyone has their secrets, and reassures him that it's okay. She gently grabs his face and admits she doesn't fully understand the source of his strength, but she knows he's anxious about becoming too strong. Still, she believes in him, stating that he is truly human in her eyes. Their conversation is interrupted by a noise outside. Wazoo looks out the window, wondering what's going on. Just then, a maid rushes into the room, panic in her voice, as she announces that they are in trouble. A horde of goblins is approaching the capital. Tada is shocked and immediately asks where the inn's owner is. The maid replies that he has gone to join the guild master and others to stop the goblin attack. Wazoo, surprised, asks if Garrett, the inn owner, can even fight. Nenya explains that long ago, Garrett and the guild master were adventure prodigies. The maid adds that a call has been sent out to gather every adventurer in the capital. Tada, still processing the news, asks if there are really that many goblins. The maid confirms that scouts counted over 1,000 goblins heading their way. Everyone looks to Wazoo, their eyes filled with worry. He smiles and announces that it's time for him to step in. Tada grabs his arm, pleading with him not to feel obligated to save the capital but to prioritize his own safety. She begs him not to overdo it. Wazoo reassures her, promising that no matter what happens, he won't die. Before leaving, he tells Nenya to take care of Tada, and she nods, agreeing to look after her. As he walks out, Tada reaches out as if to stop him but then hesitates, pulling her hand back. Instead, she simply tells him to be careful. All the adventurers had gathered at the city gate, urging the guards to raise the gate so they could confront the goblins outside. However, Orlando intervened, advising them to wait. He warned that the goblins were too numerous, and opening the gates now would allow the horde to overrun and destroy the capital. The B-ranked adventurers protested, insisting they could handle the situation. They argued that the adventurers already outside needed reinforcement. While Orlando understood their frustration, he remained firm in his decision, explaining that opening the gates now would be disastrous. Amidst the commotion, a voice called out from the crowd, asking to be let through. It was Wazoo, and Orlando immediately recognized him. Wazoo approached Orlando, asking why the crowd had gathered and where the goblins were. Orlando explained that the goblins were outside, pressing against the gate, and the gate couldn't hold for much longer. Despite the number of high-ranking adventurers present, the sheer volume of goblins made it impossible to open the gate without risking the capital's destruction. Wazoo inquired about Reagan and Garrett, expressing the need to save them. Orlando, clearly torn, acknowledged this but pointed out that civilians lived inside the capital. Although it was heartbreaking to compare human lives, if forced to choose, Orlando said he had to prioritize the people within the city walls. He tearfully admitted that if he were stronger, he would never let this happen. Wazoo reassured him, telling him not to worry, and promised to handle the situation. Wazoo asked if the adventurers could join the fight if he managed to thin the goblin ranks, to which Orlando agreed but questioned how it would be possible. Wazoo instructed him to open the gate when he gave a signal, and with that, Wazoo ran off. Reaching a certain point, Wazoo sprinted towards the gate, gathering momentum, and leapt over it. From the air, he saw the massive horde of goblins swarming outside the city. He landed with a powerful punch, clearing the area around the gate. After ensuring he had eliminated enough goblins, Wazoo called Orlando, signaling him to open the gate. Orlando peered through a small crack and saw the path was clear, astonished at what Wazoo had accomplished. Wazoo smiled, leaving the rest of the battle to the adventurers and encouraging them to give it their all. The adventurers poured out of the city, ready to fight the remaining goblins. Wazoo informed Orlando that he was going to search for Reagan and Garrett, leaving the defense of the gate in Orlando's hands. Orlando watched him go, grateful for his help. Meanwhile, Reagan was battling the goblins, feeling overwhelmed by their endless numbers. He asked Garrett if he was okay, and Garrett replied that he was managing, but there was only so much they could do with so few men. They needed to stop the goblins before they reached the northern gate, or the city would fall. Reagan mentioned that the Goblin King was still out there, and if they could find and kill him, the goblins might scatter. However, he knew this plan could backfire, leading to chaos as the remaining goblins could attack nearby villages. Suddenly, Wazoo appeared. Reagan, surprised, asked how he got there. Wazoo simply responded that he had noticed they were in trouble and came to help. Garrett warned that this wasn't something to take lightly. Wazoo asked why the goblins were attacking in such large numbers. Reagan and Garrett explained that the Goblin King, a powerful monster, was controlling the goblin army. Wazoo suggested killing the Goblin King, but Reagan stopped him, warning that without their leader, the goblins could scatter and attack nearby areas unpredictably. Instead, they planned to gather the goblins in one spot for a final all-out attack. Before they could act, a blast echoed from the northern gate. A badly injured man stumbled towards them, informing them that a demon was attacking at the north gate. Wazoo asked for clarification, and Garrett explained that demons were once humans who had become magical beasts, their immense power transforming them into something monstrous. Overwhelmed by their own magic, demons lost their humanity, becoming beings of destruction and madness. Their bodies twisted into grotesque forms, leaving no doubt that they were no longer human. Wazoo, recalling a similar situation involving Gazuna, understood the severity of the threat. Without hesitation, Wazoo sprinted towards the northern gate, determined to defeat the demon and promising to return soon. Meanwhile, Tada ran out of her house, alarmed by the explosion she had heard. Nenya tried to stop her, insisting they should stay inside, but Tada, worried about Wazoo, refused. Nenya reassured her that Wazoo was incredibly strong and would be fine. But as she spoke, a demon appeared behind her. Tada tried to warn Nenya, but it was too late. The demon struck Nenya, hurling her away, then grabbed Tada, declaring that she now belonged to him. Horrified, Tada wondered if the demon could be the city lord. Nenya, wounded, demanded to know what magic the demon had used and what he had become. The demon, reveling in his newfound power, taunted them, claiming that with Tada in his grasp, the people would soon witness the true terror of demons and goblins. Monsters are wreaking havoc in the northern area, and the citizens are gripped with fear. They are ordered to stay inside their homes and avoid the gate if they value their lives. Meanwhile, the Dragon King and his family are deeply concerned about Wazoo. As Wazoo reaches the northern gate, he spots the monsters and realizes, after careful observation, that they seem familiar. With a bit of effort, he recalls that they are the A-rankers he had defeated earlier. These transformed demons attack him together, but Wazoo easily punches them back. He remembers being told that once someone becomes a demon, there is no turning back. They cannot be saved, and it's too late for them. Though Wazoo doesn't know how these A-rankers became demons, he resolves to put an end to their suffering, knowing they can never return to their human forms. He fights them off decisively, destroying them to eliminate the threat. The adventurers around him cheer for his help. Wazoo rushes over to check if they are okay, and they thank him, mentioning that many goblins still remain. He reassures them that reinforcements are on the way. One adventurer expresses confidence that, with the demons gone, they can hold out on their own. Wazoo then tells them he's heading back to where Reagan is. When Wazoo returns to Reagan, he reports that all the demons have been defeated. Reigen, shocked by Wazu's strength, is relieved but concerned. Despite the reinforcements, the goblins remain overwhelming, and Reigen fears that without Wazu's help, they could lose the battle. He tells Wazu that they are counting on him. Wazu feels encouraged knowing he's making a difference, but before they can proceed, Nenya suddenly appears, badly bruised. Wazu is alarmed and runs to her, asking what happened. Trembling and in tears, Nenya explains that the city lord has kidnapped Tada. He had somehow transformed into a monster with wings, and she couldn't stop him. She apologizes for failing to protect Tada. Reigen is shocked, wondering how the city lord managed this amidst their struggle with the goblins. Garrett explains that the city lord took advantage of their absence. Wazu then asks what the city lord plans to do with Tada. Garrett grimly suggests that the city lord will likely force her to marry him, making her his plaything for the rest of her life. He might imprison her in his mansion, abusing her until she's beyond saving. Garrett recalls how the city lord had previously disguised himself and visited his business, and after that, Tada had even tried to end her suffering. She had believed that working there to pay off her parents' debt had doomed her to a fate she didn't want, especially with the looming threat of being forced to marry the city lord. Nenya, still shaken, tells Wazu she did everything she could to protect Tada, but the city lord still managed to take her away. As they speak, a messenger arrives, telling Reigen they can't hold off the goblins much longer, even with reinforcements. The goblins are simply too numerous. Reigen orders Wazu to go after Tada, but Wazu hesitates, not wanting to leave his friends in danger. Reigen insists, telling him that Wazu is the only one who can save Tada from the city lord. Torn between helping his friends and rescuing Tada, Wazu is unsure of what to do. Suddenly, Rangnir, the Dragon King, lands beside them. Wazu is relieved to see him, and Reigen is surprised by his arrival. Rangnir tells Wazu that he should go where he's needed most and leave the goblins to him. Grateful, Wazu leaves the battle in Ragnar's hands and rushes toward the city lord's mansion. After Wazu departs, Rangnir asks Reigen about the size of the goblin force. Reigen reports that there are about 800 goblins, including a goblin king. Rangnir remarks that they're as good as roasted, planning to incinerate them all at once. Reigen orders his men to fall back so they won't get caught in Ragnar's fiery attack. With a single breath, Rangnir unleashes a powerful fire, burning many of the goblins to ash. The adventurers cheer, praising the Dragon King. Rangnir then tells Reigen that he's in a hurry because his own daughter and Reigen's daughter, Lula, are likely scared by this incident. His words raise Reigen's morale, and he rallies the adventurers to charge forward, confident that they can win the battle. At the city lord's mansion, Tada is imprisoned in a room. The city lord smugly tells her that she is destined to be his. Tada defiantly responds, telling him he's delusional and that she will never belong to him. She reminds him that he had already violated her once and demands to know what else he wants. He bluntly tells her to become his wife. Tada, holding on to her dignity, declares that while her body may have been sullied, her heart remains pure. Angered by her defiance, the city lord slaps her, insisting that no one else would want someone like her, a mere pleasure worker. But Tada proudly asserts that her true purity is reserved for someone she loves with all her heart. The city lord, furious, tears her clothes and threatens to violate her repeatedly until she submits. As he grabs her, Tada screams. Suddenly, Wazu bursts in and kicks the city lord away. Tada, relieved to see him, runs to Wazu and hugs him. He apologizes for being late, but Tada reassures him, asking about the others. Wazu tells her everything is under control and that he's here because Nenya told him what happened. Tada, feeling like a burden, apologizes again, but Wazu comforts her, saying it's his duty as her bodyguard. He gives her his shirt to cover herself, and Tada is touched by his kindness. Before Wazu can say more, the city lord gets up and angrily demands to know who Wazu is and how he got inside. Wazu nonchalantly responds that he simply jumped over the wall. The city lord is outraged, yelling that the mansion is guarded by at least 30 B-rank adventurers. Wazu points to the defeated guards outside and says that he gave them a knuckle sandwich. Enraged, the city lord begins to fly and boast about the power he's gained, casting a spell he claims can defeat all creation except a select few. Shiro watches from a rooftop, observing the unfolding events with surprise. He never imagined the dull guy he met on the street would turn out to be so strong. Shiro acknowledges Wazu's strength, even noting how he befriended the Dragon King. Amused, he reflects on how unexpected the situation is, though he reminds himself that the City Lord's power is still formidable. He wonders how Wazu will handle him. Meanwhile, after gaining immense magical power, the demon taunts Wazu and unleashes a powerful fire spell to destroy him. Tada, terrified, begs Wazu to flee, believing he can't possibly win. At that moment, Wazu hears the voices of the first goddess and the goddess of Mother Earth. They sense the City Lord's extraordinary power but reassure Wazu that they will not let him be harmed. They appear beside him and neutralize the City Lord's magic. Tada, still fearful for Wazu's safety, pleads with him to stop and abandon her, convinced he will die if he stays. Wazu, however, reassures her with a confident wink, telling her he is completely fine. Overwhelmed, she begins to cry, asking why he would go to such lengths to help someone like her. The City Lord, shocked that his magic had no effect, stands stunned. Wazu then tells Tada that he's doing all this because he likes her. Tada is speechless, and Wazu, realizing his unplanned confession, panics, admitting he didn't mean to say it under such circumstances. Tada, in disbelief, tells Wazu that he shouldn't love someone like her, insisting that she isn't worthy due to her past. She reveals that she has been with many men, even the City Lord. Wazu, undeterred, declares loudly that he doesn't care about her past and that the woman standing before him is the one he loves. Suddenly, the City Lord attacks Wazu in a fit of rage, accusing him of stealing his woman. In response, Wazu, filled with anger, punches the City Lord in the stomach, asking what he means by his woman. The City Lord coughs up an orb, like the one Wazu had seen before, and collapses. Wazu takes note of the orb, recognizing it as being like Kazuna's. Afterward, Wazu lifts Tada in his arms and carries her out, despite her protests that she's too heavy. Wazu laughs, insisting she's light as a feather. He mentions that he will drop her off at the brothel before checking on things outside the city. Tada, concerned, hopes everyone is safe. Just then, Reagan, Ragnar, and others arrive with smiles, informing Wazu that they've taken care of the goblins, and the city is now safe. Wazu puts Tada down, and she immediately asks Nenya if she is unharmed. Nenya rushes to her and hugs her tightly, apologizing for not being strong enough to prevent what happened. Wazu reassures them both, telling Nenya that she isn't to blame, as the City Lord was no longer human. Garrett expresses his gratitude to Wazu for saving Tada, and Reagan praises Nenya for her assistance during the battle. Nenya thanks Wazu as well, acknowledging that she didn't believe in him before, making her gratitude even more significant. With the families reunited and peace restored to Linux City, the chaos that once threatened the city is finally over. The following day, Wazu wakes up feeling refreshed, happy that everything is back in order. Although the weather outside is awful, his spirits remain high because he plans to invite Tada out. Wearing the ring she gifted him, Wazu heads towards the brothel, excited to ask her to be his friend and possibly join him on his travels. Before reaching the brothel, Wazu stops by the guild master's office. Reagan informs him that the case they had built against the City Lord is now pointless, as it's uncertain whether the City Lord is even alive. Despite his condition, it's unlikely he will ever wake up. Magic specialists have also been consulted, but they aren't any closer to understanding what's happening. The same goes for the 3 Black Blaze adventurers. Wazu shares that a red orb came out of the City Lord when he defeated him, like what happened with the elf who turned into a monster in the elf village. Reagan suggests that there might be a connection and that someone may be distributing these red orbs, which are turning people into monsters. Orlando adds that reports indicate the 3 adventurers were seen purchasing red orbs from a suspicious hooded figure. Reagan asks Wazu if he is going after Tada. Confused, Wazu doesn't understand what he means. Reagan explains that Tada, along with her family, has left Linux City for safety reasons, as those still loyal to the City Lord might seek revenge. Shocked, Wazu rushes to the brothel in the pouring rain, desperate for answers. There, he finds Nenya and frantically asks where Tada has gone. Nenya explains that she doesn't know the exact destination, but Tada had asked her to track her scent and follow later. However, Tada didn't want anyone else coming along for her safety. With a sad smile, Wazu accepts the situation, wishing Tada a peaceful life. Before leaving, he asks Nenya to send his regards to Tada. Outside, Wazoo stands in the rain, staring up at the sky, feeling a deep sadness. He has been left behind once again. Elsewhere, Salona sits under a tree, feeling down. She had come to Linux City with the hope of joining Wazoo's harem but lost her chance. She reflects on how Wazoo has already made some strong connections with others, leaving her uncertain of her place. As she contemplates her feelings, Salona hears a commotion nearby. She sees Tada jump out of a carriage, telling her parents that she's following her heart and returning to Linux City. Her parents, concerned for her safety, question why Wazoo wasn't informed of her departure. Tada, emotional, explains that while they may meet again, it feels wrong to leave without telling him, as if she's cutting him out of her life. She begins to cry, and her father apologizes for not giving them more time to say goodbye. Garrett approaches and asks what's troubling Tada. She pleads with him to take her back to the city. Her mother, confused, asks why Tada is so determined to return for Wazoo, to which Tada tearfully confesses that she loves him. Salona, eavesdropping, is stunned by the revelation. Hiding behind the tree, she listens as Tada's parents, now understanding her feelings, agree to return. Suddenly, Salona steps forward and asks if the Wazoo Tada mentioned is the strong man with black hair and an unassuming appearance. Surprised, Tada asks how she knows Wazoo and if she's also interested in joining his harem. Tada and others are relaxing at a hotel, enjoying some refreshments. Tada and Salona sit at the same table and, almost at the same time, ask each other what kind of relationship the other has with Wazoo. After a brief pause, Salona remarks that it's clear Wazoo would always help someone in need, and it's no surprise that someone could easily fall for him. Tada giggles, suggesting that perhaps Salona's heart has been stolen by Wazoo as well. They both fall silent, and then, almost in unison, acknowledge that they understand that feeling. Salona, now frustrated, points out that Wazoo is deceptive in a way. He claims to be mediocre and ordinary, yet his physical strength is overwhelming. He's strong enough to defeat any monster with a single blow, and Salona wonders if any woman could resist falling for someone who protects her like that. Tada agrees, adding that Wazoo's innocence, kindness, and pure-heartedness are disarming. She likens him to a young teenager, with a way of speaking that's unexpectedly direct and sincere, especially when looking into someone's eyes. Tada wonders aloud if there's any woman who wouldn't want to dedicate her life to someone like him. Salona nods in agreement, and both women realize that they've become part of Wazoo's harem. Tada then asks Salona if she'd like to share what happened between her and Wazoo, reassuring her that she won't feel jealous. Salona responds that she feels the same and is curious to hear Tada's story with Wazoo, wondering if he did something for Tada that he didn't do for her. Meanwhile, Mir approaches Wazoo, who has been bedridden for the past few days. She tries to wake him, but he pulls her under the blanket, hugging her tightly as he silently sobs. Kayla informs Lula that Wazoo has been in bed for 5 days, and Lula notes that he hasn't been eating properly either. She decides to visit the Dragon King, Rangnir, to ask if he'll help encourage Wazoo. Rangnir questions her, asking if she knows the reason behind Wazoo's journey. Lula admits she doesn't. Rangnir then explains that Wazoo left his hometown, wounded and broken, but he longs to return. He believes that if he had friends, his emotional wounds would heal, giving him the confidence to go back. That's what Wazoo confided in him. Mel adds that they, the group around Wazoo, are not the friends Wazoo truly needs. Megal agrees, saying they are merely watching over Wazoo and Mir's future. Now is not the time for them to intervene. Wazoo must learn the true meaning of friendship on his own. Suddenly, Orlando arrives, asking where Wazoo is. Lula tells him that Wazoo is in his room but has been bedridden for days. Ignoring that, Orlando rushes to Wazoo's room, bursting in and declaring that he has something to say. He grabs Wazoo, pulling him out of bed, and insists that Wazoo follow him outside the city. Still sluggish, Wazoo asks what Orlando wants from him. Orlando replies that he wants to have a match. Wazoo dismisses the idea, saying Orlando can't possibly win. However, Orlando persists, launching an attack. Wazoo effortlessly dodges his strikes and kicks him away, telling Orlando he's tired and just wants to sleep. Despite losing, Orlando was impressed, admitting that he couldn't even land a scratch on Wazoo. Frustrated, Wazoo asks what Orlando is trying to achieve. Orlando, sitting on the grass, explains that moving his body when feeling down always helps to cheer him up. Wazoo, unmoved, replies that such advice only works if the opponent is stronger than him. He grumbles about how much he'll hate Reigen for pushing Orlando into such a pointless task. In the middle of the conversation, Orlando accidentally mentions Tada's name, causing Wazoo to punch him in the chin and angrily tell him never to mention her name again. Orlando approached Wazoo, feeling a mix of concern and frustration. He expressed his disdain for seeing Wazoo hiding away, consumed by thoughts of a girl. Orlando had come with a purpose, to urge Wazoo to confront his situation. He labeled Wazoo as uncool, which only deepened Wazoo's despair. Overwhelmed, Wazoo buried his face in his hands and cried, feeling inadequate in comparison to Orlando. Despite his harsh words, Orlando clarified that his real issue was Wazoo's current state. He admired Wazoo's strength, recalling how impressive it was to see him fight off goblins. Orlando respected Wazoo deeply and wished to embody that same protective spirit. It pained him to see someone he looked up to retreat into isolation because of a woman. Wazoo, defensive, brushed off Orlando's concern, questioning why it mattered to him. Orlando responded sincerely, revealing that he considered Wazoo a friend. Wazoo was taken aback by this sudden closeness, but Orlando insisted that he genuinely wanted to see him recover. Wazoo hesitated but eventually began to open up, sharing his inner turmoil. While people often remarked on his physical strength, he felt emotionally weak and unconfident. Despite his efforts to connect, he found himself alone. Each time he faced rejection, he retreated further into solitude, consumed by envy for those who traveled with friends. Frustrated by Wazoo's self-deprecating thoughts, Orlando took action and slapped him across the face. He firmly held Wazoo's shirt, demanding to know why he viewed himself this way. He reminded Wazoo that his strength was not diminished by a lack of companionship. Wazoo had saved Linux, proving himself a true hero in Orlando's eyes. Orlando urged Wazoo to take pride in his actions, emphasizing that the happiness he brought to others should matter more than his own feelings of loneliness. He reminded him that his journey was about helping people and spreading joy. With a passionate plea, Orlando encouraged Wazoo to reclaim his identity as the remarkable man he once was. Wazoo reflects on the three women from his past, closing his eyes in thought. When he opens them, he feels a surge of energy and decides to embrace a new opportunity. Nearby, the Dragon King's family watches from the bushes, feeling a sense of joy as they witness Wazoo's renewed hope. Wazoo and Orlando approach Reigen to announce their plans to leave Linux City. Orlando expresses his desire to become a knight, and Wazoo shares that he has trained him a bit, noting Orlando's potential. Reigen ponders for a moment, and agrees that if Wazoo believes in Orlando, then he may indeed be ready. He explains that to become a knight, Orlando must travel to the royal capital, Manhwa. Both Wazoo and Orlando confirm that this is their intention. Reigen acknowledges that Wazoo's sudden burst of energy is a perfect sign for him to start his journey, especially after spending so long in isolation. As the time to leave draws near, Lula begins to cry. Wazoo reassures her, asking her to send him off with a smile. She questions how she should feel about a regular customer leaving, while Kayla wishes him good luck and hopes he returns to Linux. Emma hugs him tightly, expressing her sadness at losing someone so valuable to their group. Reigen rewards Wazoo for his contributions thus far, giving him a badge that signifies his status as a party member from his adventurer days. He instructs Wazoo to present this badge to the master of the Adventurers Guild in the East Royal Capital, who happens to be his elder sister, though he warns Wazoo about her difficult demeanor. With farewells exchanged, Wazoo and Orlando leave Linux City, unaware that Tada and Salona are following closely behind. Tada urges Garrett to hurry, worried that Wazoo might have already departed. Garrett laughs, finding excitement in the situation. He had always believed in Wazoo's bright future, but he never expected two beautiful women to be drawn to him. Nenya joins them, sighing as she reflects on her missed opportunity to support Wazoo, finding it tough to witness his struggles. Tada playfully asks if Nenya plans to join Wazoo's harem, to which she laughs, clarifying that she only sees him as a bodyguard. Salona teases her, suggesting that she might discover Wazoo's charm in the future. Wazoo and Orlando continue their journey toward the royal capital. Along the way, Orlando defeats monsters to raise his adventurer rank, but after taking down around 30 monsters, he grows exhausted and asks Wazoo if they can take a short break. Wazoo laughs and tells him he has only defeated 30 monsters and is already tired. Orlando quickly replies that Wazoo shouldn't compare his stamina to that of an ordinary soldier. Wazoo pats him on the shoulder and admits he was only joking. He praises Orlando, saying he has become much stronger than he was back in Linux. Orlando asks if he really thinks so because he can't notice any difference when comparing himself to Wazoo. He admits that he envies him. Wazoo asks why. Orlando explains that whenever Wazoo is pushed to the brink of death, the goddesses bless him and make him even stronger. Wazoo explains that while his status does increase because of the goddesses, they weren't the ones who truly helped him survive. It was Mir who fed him something unusual, allowing his body to digest absolutely anything. Wazoo casually picks a wild mushroom and eats it. Orlando immediately warns him that it's poisonous, but Wazoo ignores him. He explains that every time he eats something strange like this, he becomes even stronger, and it's all thanks to Mir. Orlando checks his guild card and sighs. Even after defeating 30 monsters, his status has barely increased. He admits that when he first learned how Wazoo became so strong, he was incredibly jealous because it looked like Wazoo gained power effortlessly. After traveling together for several days, he realized Wazoo never shows off his strength or abuses his power. He says that kind of attitude doesn't come naturally, and that's why people rely on him. Wazoo sadly admits that despite everything, he still doesn't have any friends. Orlando laughs and says Wazoo's pessimistic personality proves he's still human. Wazoo smiles and says that if people think of him first whenever someone is in trouble, then becoming that special person would be enough for him. Orlando says he wants to become that kind of man too. Wazoo asks Orlando if he still wants to become a knight after reaching man bond. Orlando says yes. Wazoo tells him to get promoted quickly and become someone capable of commanding an entire army. Orlando says he doesn't think he can do that. Wazoo tells him not to worry because he will personally train him during the 50-day journey to the royal capital. He says Orlando will become much more confident by the time they arrive. Orlando points out that all Wazoo has done so far is make him fight monsters instead of teaching him anything. Wazoo insists that's because he's strict with his training. Orlando jokes that it's probably because Wazoo isn't good at teaching. Wazoo immediately says he's just strict. Wazoo then tells Orlando it's time to sleep because proper rest is an important part of training. Orlando happily agrees since he's completely exhausted. Wazoo asks Mir to prepare the campsite. She uses her storage magic to bring out all of their camping supplies. Orlando says he's still amazed every time he sees her magic. He asks if it's space-time magic. Wazoo says yes and explains that Mir stores all of their belongings inside it, making traveling much more convenient. They get into their beds. Orlando brings up how the Dragon King and his family transformed into humans back in Linux and asks why Mir can't do the same. Wazoo explains that according to Renner, Mir still doesn't have enough power to transform into a human. Orlando says that means she might become human someday. He jokes that even though Wazoo keeps getting rejected by women, the tiny dragon who saved his life and has stayed by his side likes him so much that she might even become his wife one day. Wazoo says he'd at least like his future wife to be human. He then tells Orlando they're defeating 100 monsters tomorrow. Orlando sighs and says he'll collapse before they even reach man bond. The next morning, Wazoo suddenly wakes up after hearing voices in the distance. He immediately tells Orlando to get up. Orlando asks what happened, but Wazoo says he can hear people arguing. Orlando says he can't hear anything. Wazoo senses that someone is in danger and immediately runs toward the sound, telling Orlando to follow him. A group of bandits has captured several women and is trying to assault them. The women struggle desperately, screaming and begging to be released. Their captain, who is tied to a tree, tells the bandits to leave her subordinates alone. She says that if they're so desperate to violate someone, they should do it to her instead. One of the bandits looks at her chubby figure and mocks her, asking who would ever want someone like her. Wazoo and Orlando arrive at the scene. Orlando is amazed that Wazoo was able to hear everything from so far away. Wazoo tells him that some women are in trouble and asks if he has his weapon with him. Orlando says yes. Wazoo replies that he doesn't know the full situation, but if someone is in trouble, they have to help. The two of them jump into the middle of the camp. The bandits demand to know who they are. Wazoo tells Orlando to take care of the three men in red armor. Orlando hesitates, wondering how he's supposed to handle all three by himself. Wazoo encourages him, saying that with his current strength, he can definitely do it. He says he'll handle everyone else. Before Wazoo can move, Two large men interrupt him and ask how he dares to ignore them. Wazoo gives them a blank look and asks who they are. They proudly introduce themselves as the Degando brothers, the leaders of the bandit gang controlling the area. Wazoo says he doesn't care who they are and punches them without another word. Orlando also charges at the men in red armor, ordering them to let the women go. The fight ends almost instantly as Wazoo and Orlando defeat every last bandit. Wazoo asks Mir for a bottle of water and hands it to the exhausted women. He asks if they're alright. They thank him and say they're fine. Wazoo rushes over to the captain and asks if she's hurt. She thanks him for saving them. Wazoo tries to untie her, but the ropes are wrapped so tightly around her plump body that he struggles to get his fingers through. After a bit of effort, he finally manages to free her. She introduces herself as Cassie, the captain of the Cassie squad and the personal aide to the second princess of the Manbond kingdom. She explains that the other women are all her subordinates. Ashamed of what happened, Cassie apologizes, saying it's disgraceful that they were captured despite being there to protect everyone. Wazoo tells her not to blame herself. He explains that he and Orlando are simply traveling to Manbond, so they were lucky enough to pass by. Cassie asks for their names, but before they can answer, the ring on her finger suddenly begins to glow. A voice comes from the ring, asking if Cassie can hear her and whether everyone is safe. Cassie replies that they're all unharmed. Wazoo and Orlando are shocked to see a ring that can be used for long-distance communication. The voice belongs to the second princess, Neminisha. She tells Cassie that they have already reached Mima village and asks her to hurry there. Before she can say anything else, several intruders suddenly appear. Nimi demands to know who they are. The intruders turn out to be soldiers wearing red armor who have tracked down the princess. One of the royal mages immediately creates a smoke screen and tells Nimi to escape. Realizing they have no chance of defeating so many enemies, the group retreats to a house on the outskirts of the village and surrounds it with a magical barrier. They know they can only hold out until their mana runs dry, so they pray Cassie arrives with reinforcements before it's too late. A short time later, help finally arrives. Nimi looks out the window and notices a young man standing outside. She has no idea who he is, but the moment she sees his back, her heart begins to race. Without even knowing his name, she falls in love with him at first sight. A few days earlier, back at Oishi village, Wazoo is busy burying the defeated bandits. Cassie and Orlando walk over and ask if they're still alive. Wazoo says there isn't an abandoned house or a prison nearby, so he's burying them underground to keep them from escaping. Orlando looks at the buried bandits and jokes that it looks like a horrible flower garden. One of Cassie's subordinates then reports that she has spoken with the village chief. She'll be heading to Linux to make sure the captured bandits are handed over and punished as soon as possible. Cassie says that saves them a lot of trouble and leaves everything to her. Before leaving, the girl looks at Orlando with a blush and says she'll definitely come back one day. She hopes he'll tell her all about his journey when they meet again. She asks him to wait for her. Wazoo mistakenly thinks she's talking to him, but Orlando suddenly blushes after realizing she's actually speaking to him. He smiles and tells her to stay safe on her journey. She then rides away on her horse. The remaining two soldiers tell Orlando that, under Captain Cassie's orders, they'll stay behind in the village to keep watch over the captured bandits. They say it's frustrating that they can't travel with him, but when they meet again, they'll never be separated. Wazoo can only watch in jealousy as Orlando somehow wins over every girl they meet, even though both of them help save the women. Wazoo starts wondering if his appearance is the problem. He even considers cutting his hair and changing his image. Mir immediately rejects the idea and starts scratching his face because his hair is her favorite place to sleep. Wazoo suddenly notices Cassie staring at him from a distance. The moment their eyes meet, she gives him a playful wink. Wazoo feels a little confused. He looks at Cassie's plump figure and starts wondering if she might actually be his type. He thinks her body size wouldn't be a problem at all since he's strong enough to carry her with ease. Mir immediately gets jealous after sensing his thoughts about another woman and smacks him on the head. Wazoo asks Cassie when she's leaving to rescue her master since it sounded like the situation was urgent. Cassie explains that Mima village is a full day's ride from there, even at top speed on horseback. She says the princess is protected by a magical barrier and the royal butler is with her, so they should be able to hold out for now, but they still need to hurry. A villager soon brings over several horses for the journey. Wazoo says he'll just run instead. Cassie is left speechless by his answer. The group sets off, with Wazoo running ahead while everyone else rides on horseback. Cassie can't believe he keeps up with the horses for an entire day without slowing down. She wonders what his body is even made of. They stop in a forest to rest for the night. As everyone sits around the campfire, Cassie says they'll reach Mima village by tomorrow evening. Cassie walks over to Wazoo and says it's a little late, but she wants to properly thank him for saving them. Wazoo smiles and tells her not to worry since they were already heading to Manbond anyway. He then asks if the person she serves is someone important in the kingdom. Cassie replies that she is. Wazoo says he has one favor to ask in return for helping them. Orlando immediately tells him he's being too shameless. Cassie asks what the favor is. Wazoo points at Orlando and says he wants him to become a knight. So once everything is over, he'd like her to help make that happen. Cassie smiles and says that request should be directed to Princess Nimi. She warns him that resolving the matter may take some time. Wazoo asks if she can explain what's happening in the kingdom. Cassie says she can't reveal the details yet, but if he earns Nimi's trust after they meet, she'll probably tell him everything about the incident in Manbond. The following evening, they finally arrive at Mima village, but the streets are completely deserted. Cassie knocks on the door of a nearby house and identifies herself as a knight from Manbond. A frightened woman peeks through a small crack in the door and tells them that 2 days earlier, a large group of soldiers wearing red armor surrounded the house on the outskirts of the village. Ever since then, the terrified villagers have been hiding inside their homes. Orlando points out that some of the bandits they defeated were also wearing red armor. Wazoo asks Cassie if she knows who they are. Cassie explains that they were secretly investigating a certain person who fled the kingdom. Those soldiers are trying to stop their investigation at all costs. The soldiers in red armor continue surrounding the house, shouting for the princess to give up and come outside. They mock her, saying no one is coming to save her, and that it's only a matter of time before the barrier runs out of magic. Wazoo and the others arrive nearby and hide behind some bushes to assess the situation. Orlando says the enemy has overwhelming numbers and asks what they should do. Cassie says there's only one option. She'll act as the decoy. Wazoo notices the transparent dome surrounding the house and asks if it's barrier magic. Cassie says yes. Wazoo points out that the barrier is already weakening, so they don't have time to waste. He tells them he's going in alone. Cassie immediately tries to stop him, reminding him that these aren't ordinary bandits but trained knights. She says there's no way he can defeat all of them by himself. Wazoo simply winks at her and signals for her to stay quiet. He calmly walks toward the soldiers before suddenly charging straight into them. One punch after another sends knights flying in every direction. The remaining soldiers rush him together, but the moment their swords hit Wazoo, the blades shatter into pieces. Wazoo looks at them and says they should at least bring proper swords if they want to kill him. Inside the house, Princess Nimi watches everything through the window. She wonders if this is the reinforcement Cassie brought with her. Seeing Wazoo defeat dozens of trained knights without breaking a sweat leaves her completely amazed. Within moments, Wazoo defeats every last soldier. Cassie and Orlando run over to him. Cassie says she already knew he was strong, but she never imagined he was this powerful. Wazoo scratches his head and says he may have gone a little overboard this time. The barrier slowly disappears, and the door finally opens. Cassie immediately kneels and reports that she has come to rescue the princess. A beautiful young woman steps outside and walks straight toward Wazoo. She stops right in front of him and stares into his eyes. Wazoo starts to panic under her gaze. She asks for his name. Slightly flustered, he replies that his name is Wazoo. She smiles warmly and introduces herself as Niminisha Manbond, the second princess of the kingdom of Manbond. After Wazoo defeats the soldiers, Nimi and the others gather inside the house. Wazoo sits beside Nimi but immediately feels uncomfortable because she's sitting much closer than necessary despite there being plenty of room. Nimi tells everyone there's no need to be so formal since this isn't an official gathering. Orlando starts the conversation, saying Captain Cassie already told them who she was, but he never expected to meet the second princess of the kingdom of Manbond like this. Nimi smiles and tells him to relax instead of speaking so formally. Wazoo nervously asks if he can move somewhere else, but Nimi completely ignores his request. She then says she hasn't introduced her companions yet. The elderly man smiles and introduces himself first. His name is Floyd, and he serves as the princess's butler. He says he witnessed Wazoo burying the defeated soldiers and found his unusual way of thinking quite fascinating. He adds that he's also impressed by Wazoo's extraordinary strength. Nimi doesn't seem pleased that Floyd keeps praising Wazoo, so she asks the last member of the group to introduce herself. The shy girl hesitates for a moment before quietly saying her name is Kumia, the princess's personal maid. Wazoo and Orlando can't help but notice Kumia's unusually large chest. Mimi immediately catches Wazoo comparing Kumia, Cassie, and herself in his head and glares at him. Orlando finally introduces himself. He explains that he and Wazoo left Linux and are currently traveling to Manbond. Mimi asks if he's an adventurer. Orlando replies that he's just an ordinary soldier who dreams of becoming a knight. He explains that Wazoo is the adventurer traveling with him to the royal capital. Mimi then asks if the two of them were the ones who rescued Cassie and defeated the soldiers in red armor. Cassie confirms that's exactly what happened and says Wazoo defeated every single soldier surrounding the house all by himself. She then gives Wazoo an affectionate look. Mimi's curiosity immediately grows, and she says she'd like to hear the whole story. Wazoo suddenly senses the first goddess trying to contact him. He excuses himself and quickly steps outside. He asks what happened. The first goddess says she's having a very important discussion with the goddess of Mother Earth. Wazoo checks his status card but notices nothing has changed. He wonders what danger detection level 1 is supposed to mean. A moment later, he realizes the important discussion is actually an argument over breast size. The goddess of Mother Earth keeps teasing the first goddess for having a small chest, leaving Wazoo completely speechless. Inside the house, everyone wonders why Wazoo suddenly ran outside. Mimi asks Orlando if Wazoo already has someone he loves. Orlando is caught off guard by the question. Mimi quickly explains that she was worried she might have been too friendly with him and accidentally upset him. Orlando smiles and says that's not the case. Wazoo is simply nervous around women because he isn't used to them approaching him. He says Wazoo doesn't have a lover. He just lacks confidence, gets hurt easily, and has become pessimistic whenever it comes to women's feelings. Cassie, Kumia, and Mimi all react differently after hearing that. Orlando adds that Wazoo is more gentlemanly than most people and is always willing to help anyone in need. Mimi smiles, happy to hear that. Wazoo returns a moment later and sits beside Mimi again. He asks why she and her companions left the royal capital. Mimi lets out a small sigh and says that if she tells him the truth, he'll end up getting involved in the kingdom's problems. Wazoo says he doesn't mind. Seeing his determination, Mimi decides to trust them. She explains that the kingdom of Manbond is ruled by King Gavilio and Queen Miralina Manbond. They have 3 children. The eldest is the crown prince, Navilio Manbond. Mimi and Naralina Manbond are twin sisters, with Naralina being the elder twin. Mimi says Navilio is exceptionally talented in politics, diplomacy, military strategy, and almost everything else. He's known throughout the kingdom as a genius, and both the government and the citizens deeply admire him. She then talks about Naralina. On the battlefield, she's so powerful that she's known as the Blood Rain Valkyrie. She's capable of defeating entire armies and is the pride of Manbond's knights. Mimi says she's nothing like her siblings. She specializes in barrier magic and always tries to solve problems peacefully. Because of that, people call her the Bloodless Holy Princess. She explains that their family lived peacefully until one day, when both the king and queen suddenly fell unconscious from an unknown illness. They still haven't awakened. Instead of working together during the crisis, Navilio and Naralina suddenly turned against each other. They began treating one another as enemies and even started preparing for war. Believing there had to be someone manipulating the situation, Mimi, Floyd, Kumia, Cassie, and her knights began investigating the incident. She says the soldiers in red armor were only trying to stop their investigation, which means they're probably not the true masterminds behind everything. Wazoo asks if that means someone else is pulling the strings behind all of this. Cassie says they're still investigating the mastermind, but they already know why Navilio and Naralina suddenly became enemies. Before explaining, she asks Mimi if they were wearing anything unusual when they changed. Mimi thinks for a moment and says Navilio was wearing a bracelet, while Naralina had a necklace around her neck. Cassie says the guild master of the Adventurers Guild headquarters in the eastern royal capital, Relaya, identified them as cursed tools. Mimi is shocked to hear that. Cassie explains that those cursed tools were supposed to be locked away inside a sealed vault, but someone stole them. The bracelet carries the immature puppet curse, while the necklace bears the feast of the berserker curse. The longer someone wears them, the stronger the curse's control becomes, making them incredibly dangerous. Mimi wonders who could have forced her siblings to wear such terrifying cursed tools. She says finding the mastermind can wait because removing the curse is far more important. Cassie explains that the curse can be broken if the cursed tools are removed or destroyed. Mimi sadly says that's easier said than done. Wazoo tells her they're her own brother and sister, so getting close to them shouldn't be difficult. Nimi shakes her head and says they don't even recognize her anymore. On top of that, each of them is constantly protected by 6 powerful knights, making it nearly impossible to get close. Wazoo immediately suggests breaking through by force. Cassie hesitates and reminds him that these aren't ordinary soldiers like the ones in red armor. Each of those knights is said to be as strong as an A-rank adventurer. Orlando smiles and says that if they're willing to use force, Wazoo can handle it. He says Wazoo's strength is simply abnormal. Wazoo bashfully replies that Orlando really knows him well. Nimi looks at Wazoo with hope and asks if he can really save her siblings. Wazoo confidently says he can. He says he'll defeat them quickly if that's what it takes. He even shows her his guild card, explaining that it states even a god's sword can harm him. Wazoo then tells Nimi that he has a younger sister himself, so he understands how painful it must be to watch siblings who once cared for each other become enemies. He says Nimi always seemed cheerful and independent, but now her own brother and sister don't even recognize her. She must have been carrying that loneliness all by herself. He also praises her for leaving the safety of the kingdom to investigate the truth and save her family. Wazoo says it's obvious the Man-Bond siblings were once very close, and that's exactly why he wants to help. Nimi becomes emotional after hearing those words. She thanks Wazoo from the bottom of her heart and formally asks him to accept the mission as an unofficial request outside the Adventurers Guild. Nimi asks Wazoo if he'll destroy the cursed tools and bring her brother and sister back to normal. Wazoo says he will. He then adds that he'll do it on one condition. Nimi asks what the condition is. Wazoo points at Orlando and says his dream is to become a knight. He knows it's impossible to make him a knight immediately, but he asks if she can at least give Orlando a chance to prove himself. Orlando is moved to tears after hearing Wazoo ask for a favor on his behalf. Nimi smiles and gladly accepts. She says Orlando has already proven his worth by helping save Cassie and her subordinates. Orlando immediately kneels before the princess and thanks her. With Orlando's future finally secured, Nimi asks Wazoo if there's anything he wants for himself. Wazoo says he doesn't need any reward. Nimi smiles and says she'll decide his reward herself. She jokingly declares that she will be Wazoo's reward. Wazoo is left speechless. Nimi tells him it's nice that he cares so much about Orlando's future, but he doesn't have to be so formal with her. She asks him to call her by her first name and speak to her casually. Wazoo nervously says he doesn't think he can do that. Nimi gives him a sharp glare, and Wazoo immediately gives in. Satisfied, Nimi says they'll leave for the royal capital tomorrow morning and that she'll be under Wazoo's protection. She then wishes everyone good night and reminds them that the men's room is separate from the women's. Floyd suddenly suggests that Orlando and he can sleep in another room so Wazoo and Nimi can spend the night together. Nimi instantly calls him a pervert and sends him flying out the window. The next morning, Kumiya wakes Wazoo and tells him it's time to leave. She pulls away his blanket and asks how long he plans to keep sleeping. Wazoo sits up laughing and says she seems completely different from yesterday. Kumiya bluntly asks what he means by that. Just then, Floyd walks into the room and announces that everyone is ready to depart. Wazoo asks why Kumiya's personality changed so much overnight. Floyd laughs and says he forgot to mention something yesterday. Kumiya actually has 2 personalities. Wazoo asks if Kuma is Kumiya's twin sister. Floyd laughs and says it's nothing like that. He explains that Kumiya has a split personality. Kumiya is her usual personality, while Kuma comes out from time to time. He adds that Kuma may sound rude, but she's actually very kind. Wazoo nods and says she really does act like a proper maid. Kuma immediately glares at him and says she'll wash his body herself, ordering him to come over. Wazoo quickly refuses and says he can wash himself. Wazoo heads to the bath with Mir. He tells her that everyone they've met is so strange. Floyd was thrown out of a window last night, yet he wasn't injured at all. He doesn't feel human in the slightest. Wazoo suddenly realizes he's not exactly an ordinary human either. Mir quietly stares at him with a smile. Wazoo asks why she's looking at him like that because it's making him feel embarrassed. He says he doesn't mind being naked in front of her, since she's always been by his side. But if Mir ever becomes human like Rangnir and the other dragons, he'd probably be too embarrassed to let her see him like this. Mir happily smiles after hearing that. After getting dressed, Wazoo walks outside and meets Nimi. They greet each other, and Wazoo apologizes for making her wait. Nimi says she doesn't mind. She steps closer and notices that his robe is crooked, so she starts fixing it for him. Wazoo thanks her. Mir immediately gets jealous and starts tugging on Wazoo's robe as well. Wazoo laughs and says it looks like Mir wants to help too. He picks her up and hugs her, calling her adorable. Mir proudly puffs out her chest after winning his attention. The group finally arrives at the royal capital, Manbond. At the entrance, Cassie says she'll escort Relaya to the royal castle. Nimi decides to stay with Wazoo so they can remove the curses from her brother and sister. The others wish them luck before parting ways. After entering the capital, Wazoo is amazed by the enormous city. He says it would probably take half a day just to cross it from one side to the other. Nimi laughs and says that's only if someone walks around the city. She explains that Manbond is built in a circular shape and is divided into 3 districts: the royal castle, the noble ward, and the outer ward. Nimi then asks Wazoo where he's from. Wazoo replies that he's from Iskoa. She asks if he's used to seeing cities like this. Wazoo says he grew up in the mountains, so a place this large still feels completely new to him. Nimi smiles and says that after traveling as an adventurer for so long, it's no wonder he's become so strong. Wazoo awkwardly says that's true, in a way. He then admits that Manbond is far more prosperous than Iskoa. Nimi happily explains that the kingdom only began flourishing after her father became king. Under his rule, Manbond became a major hub for importing and exporting rare goods, allowing the royal capital to develop at an incredible pace. The two of them arrive at the gates of the royal castle. Wazoo comments that Nimi's father must be an incredible king. Nimi smiles and says he'll understand once he meets him. She adds that despite being the king, her father doesn't act like one at all. She tells Wazoo to wait while she speaks with the guards. Just then, the castle gates suddenly open, and a carriage rushes straight toward them. Nimi is standing directly in its path. Wazoo instantly grabs her arm and pulls her out of the way. The carriage comes to a stop, and Wazoo says they should have been more careful because someone could have gotten hurt. A young man steps out of the carriage and walks over to them. He greets Nimi and asks where she's been all this time. Wazoo wonders who he is. The man is Denroga. Nimi asks if he's on his way to visit the king along with Chancellor Z. Denroga says that's right. His father asked him to visit the king. He then notices Wazoo and asks who he is. Nimi explains that Wazoo is a powerful adventurer recommended by Relaya. Since her brother and sister are currently fighting each other, she hired him as her bodyguard to avoid getting caught in the conflict. She adds that she's about to show him around the castle. Denroga laughs and says Wazoo doesn't look strong at all. Nimi immediately becomes annoyed. She says they're leaving and tells Denroga to be careful since he doesn't seem to have anyone capable of protecting him. She even suggests that he should hire a bodyguard too. As she walks away, Denroga calls out to stop her. He says he wants to discuss their marriage. He complains that her father still refuses to approve it, and says they should find a way to change his mind. Nimi simply smiles, says goodbye, and continues walking with Wazoo. After entering the castle, Wazoo asks if he can ask her something. Nimi already knows he's referring to Denroga. Wazoo says he overheard him mention marriage. Nimi lets out a sigh and explains that Denroga is the son of the Duke of Frebend. She says the kingdom originally had 2 royal families, the Manbond family and the Gunnerbond family. The Gunnerbond family founded the kingdom, but after the first king died without leaving behind an heir, the Manbond family inherited the throne while the Gunnerbond family continued supporting the kingdom as dukes. She explains that her engagement to Denroga was arranged by his father without her consent. She has no intention of marrying him and plans to ask her father to cancel the engagement as soon as he wakes up. She angrily declares that she'd never let a man like Denroga touch even a single strand of her hair. Nimi then suddenly asks Wazoo if he remembers the reward she promised him. Wazoo says he does. She smiles, blushes, and reminds him that she is his reward. Wazoo assumes she's joking, but Nimi shyly tells him that if she really is his reward, then he's free to do anything he wants with her.